Okay, everybody, it's 6:30. We'll call the meeting to order. It is June 13th. Can you believe that? And with that, we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thanks for being here, everybody. We have a pretty full agenda, so we'll go right along. Ann, we do roll call attendance, please?
Sure. Bartlett.
Here.
Lyle.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Cortade.
Here.
Oh, Matt. S. Cortade.
Here.
Beth Friend.
Here.
And it seems that Matt Cook is absent and excused.
Correct. Okay, and with that, we'll move on to the agenda. You see the agenda before you. We have a regular consent calendar, which does include a liquor license resolution, buildings and grounds part-time wage rate, appointments to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which you have that updated information on your desk there in front of you with the names and the terms. And then the business before us today is Bayview Water and Sewer turnover, 3 Mile Trail engineering request for proposals, the DNR Trust Fund acquisition grant for Holiday Woodlands, short-term rental moratorium ordinance, and master plan update. So with that, is there anybody on the board that would like to declare a conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, is there an approval of the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Okay, so moved by Sue Cortade with plenty of support by, you can pick one, Bartlett or Walters. And with that, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed by no. Okay, motion carries. We have an agenda. And this is the opportunity for public comment. I will say, looking down through the agenda, we will be offering opportunities for public comment during items D and E. And so if you're here to comment on either item D, which is the short-term rental moratorium ordinance, or the master plan update, if you'll hold your public comment until that agenda item, that would be helpful. So this public comment period will be for anything else that's on the agenda or any comments. Ann, do you want to go through the rules for the public comment?
The purpose of the public comment is to give members of the public an opportunity to express their views and opinions to the members of this commission, members of this board. To maintain order and ensure fairness to every speaker, the following rules must be followed during public comment. Speakers will approach the podium and introduce themselves by stating their name and address, and then proceed to make their comment. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and is only allowed to speak once on the same matter. Communication previously emailed to the commission is not necessary to be read aloud. Public comment time may not be given to another member of the public. Any arrangement for speaking on behalf of others must be arranged prior to the meeting. When your time is at 2 minutes, 30 seconds, you'll be alerted with a yellow signal to wrap up your comment, and at 3 minutes, you'll be alerted with a red signal, and the chair will ask you to conclude your comments. That is the synopsis.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we will open public comment, and it will say if there are more than one, please just line up behind the person who's giving public comment and be ready to come in and start your public comment immediately after. So anyone for public comment, please go ahead and step up to the podium and introduce yourself. Hi, Mr. Parker, how are you this evening?
Great, thank you for asking. Robert Parker, 901 Garfield, here this evening on behalf of Wheelo Estado, with a few comments on the Lakemore, which is right adjacent to the client's property. The Township, after identifying significant deficiencies in Lakemore's site plan, about a year ago required Lakemore to submit an amended site plan. It did so, and the Planning Commission approved that site plan in June of 2021. The approval was subject to 9 conditions, one of which was a review and approval of stormwater retention measures. The Township's engineers, Wade Trim, were just recently provided with as-built plans. In a summary letter, Wade Trim observed that what was built differed significantly from what was permitted, that several significant impervious items appeared on the as-built that were not approved in the original permit. The elements and materials which were used were many of them were denied in the original permit, that Lakemore utilized below-ground storage without showing why above-ground storage was not feasible, that patio pavers were installed without being permitted, that measures were utilized which were in contravention of the township's stormwater ordinance, that Wade Trim had numerous questions regarding the impervious surface calculations, and the list goes on. We read in the newspaper where Garfield Township is prepared to shut down a local restaurant for zoning violations, and over in Acme Township, that township board is prepared to close the curtains on alleged zoning violations related to the Traverse City Horse Shows. And yet, in East Bay Township, Lakemore is allowed to commence another tourist season with significant unresolved issues related to its stormwater retention plan, a plan which the township's engineers have determined may be in contravention of the township's stormwater ordinance. We think the township's been more than patient, and we urge the township to undertake enforcement efforts. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Parker. Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move straight into correspondence and reports, and you'll see we have a park plan dividend letter that came to the township, as well as the April, excuse me, and May treasurer's report. And from there, we will go on to the consent agenda. Ann, if you're able to go over the consent agenda for us, that would be great.
The purpose of the consent agenda is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with in one board motion without discussion. Any member of the board, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent agenda, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single board action adopting the consent calendar. This evening, you have the board minutes of May 9th, 2022, regular meeting. The general fund, check numbers 17066 through 17144, the amount of $57,028.62. The emergency fund, check numbers 5000 through 5031, the amount of $21,180.48. The receiving fund, check numbers 2865 through 2865, the amount of $48,575.57. The escrow fund, check numbers 1844 through 1848, in the amount of $3,360.85. There's nothing out of the road SAD fund at this time. There were, looks like 4 payrolls. April 24th through May 7th, check numbers 7323 through 7325, total $53,748.50. May 8th through May 21st, check numbers 7326 through 7330, total $52,989.55. A special pay paramedic vacation payout, check numbers 7331, total $1,091.40, and included a $204.33 payroll tax. Payroll from May 22nd through June 4th, check numbers 7332 through 7334, total $52,918.02. And total payroll was $160,747.50, and total amount paid $290,893.02. Proposed budget adjustments, 2022-01 and 2022-02. And 3 other items: liquor license resolution, building and grounds, let's see, we had a building and grounds part-time wage rate, and zoning board of appeals appointments.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. With that, I'll just clarify that the board minutes that were in your packet were updated, and they're in a subsequent packet and were available on your desk. And as well, the appointments were outlined, and that is for the movement of John Ewan from a alternate appointment on the ZBA to a regular member, and then the appointment of Rod Kivel, and the reappointment of Lindsay Wolf and Carl Studzinski. With that, is there anybody who would like anything moved off of the consent calendar?
Can we get the revised minutes?
Sure, absolutely.
Text amendment
Sure,
proposed.
absolutely. Is it something quite quick
Yeah, it's
that?
very-
Oh, let's just go ahead and do that.
So when we were talking to GoRec, we had the public comment, on page 5, we have GoRec public comment, which starts at 7:58. But then when the board starts talking about it, there's nothing highlighted. So I just would like a timestamp of when the board discussion stops.
Starts?
Yeah,
Starts?
starts.
Okay,
That's my suggestion.
we can do that. So this consent agenda will include the approval of the minutes of May 9th as updated and before the board, with the addition of the timestamp for the beginning of the board's discussion after public comment. And we'll pull that time off of the,
Well, I think it's right here.
oh, is it right there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you closed the public hearing at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I think it's there. I think it just, if we bold it and move it, it would be a good.
That's easy to do.
Absolutely.
That is a clerical correction.
Sure, that sounds good. Okay, anybody, any member of the public like anything removed from the consent agenda?
I still
Okay.
would-
Oh, okay, I didn't hear you speak up.
Oh, H, 1 and 2.
H1 and 2, liquor license and 1 and 2. And so we'll put those at the end of the business before the township board. Okay, and so we have the consent agenda. Yes.
Sorry. We have someone here for number 1 in the audience. You still want it at the end?
Wait, Josh is here, or,
Yes.
I'm sorry, not, Josh?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, well, thanks for noticing that. We'll put that in before Bayview then. Okay, so with that, our consent agenda is the board minutes, the payables that Ann's gone over, and the appointments to the ZBA. Correct? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there support?
Or
Okay, motion made by M. Cortate and support by Walters. Any further discussion? And we'll do a roll call vote.
M. Corte?
Yes.
Walters?
yes,
S. Corte?
Yes.
Lyle? Bartlett?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes. Okay, with that, we will move on to business before the township board. We'll have the liquor license resolution, and that is in the consent calendar. This was information, it's pretty self-explanatory that is in, I just have to find the page. If someone finds it first, go ahead and yell.
It's 18 of 203.
Thank you. So this is updated information. Josh, if you want to head up,
I have just one quick question.
what's your question?
Since I was the one that questioned last time that we hadn't finished he had to make some adjustments to his building to make it shorter, to make it qualify. And now we had that on the public record. I just would like it on the public record now that they have met those requirements. Is that true?
That is true, correct, because before, they were able to put the resolution forward to the state the last time they had to meet that. So we waited until Claire had given the okay on that. They did so. They weren't chosen for that liquor license. There were, as you know, several that were out there, applications. And so this is another route that they informed you that you could take. So, yeah.
And I have no problem with it. I just wanted to make sure on the record that it
Okay.
was.
Then would you like to make a motion?
I will. We will accept.
Thank you.
The numbers here. Liquor license,
There's no number on it, so you just state who it's for.
all right. But who is it for?
It's on the bottom of page 18. I bet I can find it for you. Move to approve local government approval resolution for a resort economic development license, B Hotel, as requested by Werfel Resorts, AI Spirits LLC for Alexandra Inn located at 2227 US 31 North Traverse City.
So moved.
Is there support for that?
Support.
Okay, so motion by M. Cortate and support by S. Cortate. Any further discussion? Okay, resolution, Ann, we'll do a roll call vote.
M. Corte?
Yes.
S. Corte?
Yes.
Walters?
Yes.
Bartlett?
Yes.
Lyle? Friend?
Yes. All right, thank you very much. Good luck, Josh. We will move on to the Bayview Water and Sewer turnover. Brian couldn't be here this evening, but we had a pretty straightforward, good meeting. I'll ask Joe to come up with Doug Mansfield as a resource there, but again, this is pretty self-explanatory based on the information that's in the packet. We did meet myself, Brian Souza, Claire, our attorney, which was Brian Graham, and then Joe Lucrecio, and you, and the contractor too, as well, right? Yeah. And so, as you can see, typically, when the system is completed and turned over, then they can go through everything to get the occupancy and begin to occupy that building. It's a rather large project, and so they're finishing there at a point where a stage would be complete. And that was pretty easily identified by a certain subset of buildings, and all of the infrastructure is ready to be turned over for that. Now, they're looking at occupying it before our next July meeting, so that's why we have it here. There are some things as noted in Brian's letter. What we would suggest doing is approving it with these conditions that Brian administratively approves it. Neither Brian nor our attorney had any concerns that this put the township at any disadvantage or inability to allow everything to be turned over correctly. So this would be considered turned over, and then what I would request to Brian from that is when he has everything and he administratively approves it, to just issue a memo to us at the township board so that you'll be aware that, yes, that was all taken care of. Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that we have a completion bond posted with you that's like $780,000, which was for the entire project. We have no plans to come to you and say, please reduce that. We're going to leave it in place. We're talking really about a 90-day window here. Sorry, that's no problem.
They're already calling for the rentals, or what, you know?
Yeah, right. Well, we had the completion bond in place. We plan on leaving that. We're talking about a 90-day window before everything is complete, including the base course of asphalt, all sewer and water infrastructure. The eastern portion of the project backing up to Elmbrook will be complete by then. So some window between September and October 15th, Molon will, for all intents and purposes, be out of there except for our wearing course of asphalt. So the rest of the infrastructure will be in, and right now we're at kind of a 2/3, 1/3 break point of sewer and water completed and 1/3 left. But again, that completion bond of $780,000 is there. Every stick of sewer and water that's gone in the ground, I'm sorry. Every stick of that sewer and water that's gone in the ground has been tested, okay? And Brian and Damien can attest to that. And so they've been there to witness and test and everything else. The force main along Hammond has been installed and tested. Yeah, which we thought we were going to have to put temporary pumps in the lift station. We got our permanent pumps.
Oh, great.
Yeah, we got our permanent pumps, which, you know, all the criteria that you asked for, we got them. So it was a surprise. We didn't expect it, but it was a nice surprise. And then, Bayview is made up of different product types, right? It's got the 3-story buildings, and it's got the townhomes, which are, condos for the most part. It's all rental, as you know, which puts even more onus on us. It's not like we're putting any kind of responsibility on a homeowner. Mm-hmm. We're there for the long haul, so anything, we're living with everything that we're asking for you to accept. But the townhomes themselves are, we're doing those incrementally. So the first building, Parks 1, will be occupied, hopefully, June 30th. And then we have some incremental leasing from there. Parks 2 will be the end of July, Parks 3, September, and we're just kind of moving along as we go. We've done everything according to Hoyle with John DeVozo, per our special action memo with DPW. And so, he was another participant in the meeting, as you know, and so was okay with it. So, other than that, I mean, it's, we've got it graphically represented here, what's been done, but because we've addressed public health, safety, and welfare, fire department's been involved every step of the way, all the hydrants are energized and, can be hooked up right now in the event of any fire on site. So,
There's also, once the closeout starts, there's also a 1-year warranty bond on that, on top of the completion bond will be there through the rest of the project.
right.
Yeah, it was, I will say it was a very, very congenial, good meeting where everybody came to a quick consensus of what made sense. And that's one of the reasons when Brian said, it's fine if I'm not there tonight, it's, I'd really been jumping through hoops to get there. And I said, I think just write a memo, everything's in there. Board member may call you to ask a question, but other than that, any questions for myself or for Joe or Doug?
I guess the only thing I'd have to ask is on the letter from Wade Trim, it says developer asking township can approve acceptance of phase 1 water sanitary sewer mains in township system with the conditions that all items are reviewed and approved by the township engineer prior to any units being issued a certificate of occupancy. Now, that could be under number 1, that all closeout items submitted and approved by a township engineer.
Yes, because they would have to have all of that in before Brian would approve that.
I just
Yeah,
wanted to verify that.
yeah. Yep, absolutely.
To that end, I can add, we received all the GPS coordinates of all the valves, the turns, the ends, all the elements, and we've already turned around those as-built documents. Now we're working on rims, inverts, the vertical information as we get it from the township engineer. So it really is working hand in hand on getting those documents done.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. There is a suggested motion. It was pretty complicated and had some specific criteria, so I asked Brian to pen a motion. You've had access to take a look at that, and you have no issues with supplying any of that information and meeting those criteria? Okay. So if there are no other questions, is there a motion?
You want me to read the whole thing?
I think we will.
Okay. Move to accept the water and sanitary sewer system of Phase 1 of the Bayview development into the township's system and assume operation and maintenance duties of said infrastructure with the following conditions. Number 1, that all closeout items are submitted and approved by the township engineer. Number 2, that the township engineer submits a letter to the township outlining the proper documents have been received, reviewed, and approved in their entirety. Number 3, that until such time that the approved sanitary sewer pumps and controls are delivered and installed into the pump station and approved by the township engineer, the developer will assume operational duties of said lift station. Number 4, that the developer assumes all responsibilities for any backups caused by the lift station. Number 5, that Phase 2 cannot be accepted until all of Phase 1 has been accepted and the lift station completed with the proper pumps and controls.
Okay. Okay. Motion made by Walters and supported by Lyle. Further discussion. And I would just add that even some of those points are moot because of the lift station. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the 3-mile trail engineering and request for proposals. With that, Claire, if you wouldn't mind coming up, and is Elizabeth here? Hi, Elizabeth, how are you? Come on up. This is Elizabeth Calcutt with TART. And I'm really going to let these two take it over and do some explanation. But as you can see from the intro memo, we've been having a longstanding relationship with this and our other agency partners, and we're really gaining some very good traction on it. I'm excited about it. But anyway, do you want to do kind of an overview, Elizabeth or Claire? Go ahead.
Elizabeth doesn't have much of a voice right now, so I'll do a quick overview, and then Elizabeth can answer any questions. So as you'll recall, this has come, I know, before you a number of times. Back in August, I believe, August of 2021 was when you approved kind of that final conceptual plan for the 3-mile trail, as well as the connections leading to places of work, schools, residences. So leading up to that conceptual plan, we had a lot of residential support in the form of an open house as well as a township survey. So with that plan, TART has really taken the lead, and as well as East Bay Township has supported a number of grant applications and other avenues looking for funding. And so we found out, I believe it was in March, that TART had successfully secured $900,000 earmark through Representative Bergman's office. So TART has, the next step would be issuing an RFP for that, final engineering construction. So TART has taken the lead in helping the township draft an RFP. This RFP would go out, but the township would be issuing the RFP. So that RFP is in front of you tonight. I know that there are not dates associated with it, and so we kind of discussed this afternoon about dates, and we have some recommendations. We would recommend sending that out on June 15th, which would be this Wednesday. We would wait 2 weeks to allow for questions, so the question and answer period would go until June 29th. That would be the deadline for submitting questions and having your name on the list of an interested applicant or party to respond to the RFP. And then we're looking at a July 20th due date to have all proposals submitted. That would give 5 weeks to submit the proposals, with the goal of having a selection committee that would be able to make a recommendation back to the township board at your August meeting and be able to move forward from there. We're looking at having a selection committee made up of representatives from TART, the township, as well as a road commission representative. And then we would have a project working committee, which would be more broad. That would include the Land Conservancy, Norte, other project partners, kind of helping to guide this. So, any questions?
So in the RFP, you will see a couple months and days that are highlighted in red that we were just going to get clarification today on those dates. So as, again, Claire went over those, June 15th, June 29th, did you say?
29th.
And July 20th for submittal. And then we had talked today, but we had not clarified with TART yet. What we were anticipating is a 5-member, as Claire mentioned, a larger steering committee for this, but smaller for bringing back a recommendation to the township board. And so for that, we were looking at Claire and myself from the township. Elizabeth, we volunteered you from TART, along with Chris Cushman, who is very experienced in this, and the Road Commission is the other one that we would like to pull in. We have not clarified with the Road Commission on their participation in that, but they have been very helpful and good partners in some things that we have done, so. Yeah, and as far as how, this is for, tonight is for the approval of the RFP. But as board members, I know you're thinking like, okay, long-term down the road, how does this work? This is $900,000 for Bergman's office, and, how do we go through that? So that does come to the township, that $900,000. No, how are we doing that? Because we were clarifying that today, but go ahead.
So that one, actually, that'll come directly, that one comes through TART. That
Through
was
TART.
Something we submitted, so that was different from the EDA grant.
That's what I was wondering, okay. Okay, that's good. So we still do take a look at all of the, I think the cost, the payouts that are there to look at that through the steering committee, correct?
The steering committee could be the source, otherwise, The township would still hold the contract with the consultant, so you'd still be the recipient of the invoices, but then you in turn and invoice us. So that's something, most likely a separate agreement between the treasurer
Gotcha.
and the township.
Okay.
Probably be a good next step for us.
So, yeah, we can get that finalized and then to the township board for probably the August meeting before, go ahead.
August, or if it makes everyone more comfortable, and we can try for next month as well.
That's right. I'm already thinking it's July. I'm selling us a month short. How about that? So we, yeah, exactly. Lose a month of summer. So we can get that agreement together with Chart and kind of get how those funds will run and that sort of thing. Go ahead.
We are just, the funding, we continue to receive notices that we are the recipient. We're still working on getting that funding, so.
Yeah.
The timing is good.
Yeah. And I think as you saw in here, probably the EDA grant, we weren't as lucky on, but we did hear that it was very competitive. They had a lot of applications. When we had meetings with the rep, who, was very positive and there were good things, but there's just only so many applications that they can fund. But we're very happy they were able to find $900,000 for this, because it's not always easy to find that kind of money for the engineering, so. Go ahead.
I have 4 questions. The first one, are there any creek crossings? So how are we gonna do that when zoning says we can't have any right now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And so that's why we're working on that zoning ordinance amendment. And we'll be working on that concurrently with the design.
Okay. Section 6.5, the line item costs, I recommend that be a separate page, and that page also have a signature from a company executive on it, so that you have, you have the numbers that you can go apples to apples, they're not deep in something. You can pull that particular page out. Another thing I haven't seen in here that I've seen in a lot of proposals lately is a maximum amount of pages, so that you get a very condensed and very concise. Instead of reading pages and pages of repetitive information, you limit the people to a specific amount of pages. And you might even, give them font size and line spacing like we did in college, right? And then another thing is why do we need 10 copies when we only have a 5-member board?
So, I can take a couple of those. For one, as far as the maximum page number, you're right, we don't have the maximum number of page, although it has been limited to things like 8.5 by 11, so there's no 11 by 14s in there, those types of things, copied front and back, is no spiral plastic, you can get some really snazzy stuff. And this is kind of, and I'm sure this isn't Tart's first rodeo, so I'm sure that this came from them saying, hey, we want something that we can easily compare one to the other. Although it doesn't have a maximum page requirement, it does have exactly what they have to fit. So I feel pretty comfortable with that, because anything more.
You should still have a maximum page. You can figure out how many pages in each section seems to make sense and go from there and actually give people more leeway than you think. But some of these people out here give you lots and lots of paper when we don't need them.
Yeah, well, I think digitally we can handle that. And you're right, I don't think that we probably need 10 copies, do we?
No, I think that was just a change.
Just a general, and probably,
We had 2.
you did? Perfect. I probably did that based on what we do with like our audit or something like that. But you're right, we got the audits the other day and it was like, well, it's available online, so, we can easily change that down. I would probably just do 5 copies if there's a 5-person steering committee. And anything that goes to the board will be digital, so. What was the first?
We have an ordinance that says there can't be any creek crossing.
Right. And so again, that was with the conceptual design. So this is the engineering, so they will start to work with that and work with facts on the ground. And I think you guys, the planning commission, have started taking a look at that, right?
Yeah, I think historically, the township has allowed creek crossings, and it's not consistent with the zoning ordinance, and so that was really the reason that we were looking at making sure that the ordinance is in line with what the township wants in terms of creek crossings.
I was going to say, Tart already has several creek crossings in East Bay. I'm just saying, I don't know how you'd get the trail without them.
Well, exactly, but our zoning ordinance says you can't, so.
No, I
We
agree.
really need to, I just want to make sure, because, you know, right now, what is proposed can't be done in the township.
And you have that, you've already looked at that, and then it's coming back to your
We haven't looked at it
next
yet.
meeting.
We just had an introduction to it, and so it's going to be at least 2 more meetings before we have a public hearing on it.
Okay.
Yeah, our attorney is drafting language for the planning commission to review at the July meeting.
But the interesting aspect of it is whether it is a non-motorized, right? But that would, you know, eliminate the e-bikes, you know? But then again, do we want to have non-motorized? Because some of these properties, the residential parcels are bisected by a creek, and what we're saying is that they can't get to the other side of their property if we do that. So that's what's getting it got really hairy really fast when we were talking about, you know, the bike trails, so.
Well, I do think, go ahead, Elizabeth, did you have something to add?
This is a process that's going to take some time on the engineering, so it offers, there'll be a lot of survey and geotechnical and other items before we know any specifics on where we would be crossing or what a crossing might entail. So this is, appropriate timing. There are ways out on the engineering side.
So it's appropriate timing that the planning commission's taking a look at that. Awesome. Okay. Other questions, comments? First, I want to thank you, Elizabeth. I want to thank TART for their partnership in this. They have really done the heavy lifting in this, and we're very thankful that you guys are interested in expanding the trail system into East Bay Township. We did hear that resoundingly from master plan survey respondents, I guess you'd say. And so it's a good thing, and we're happy about that. With that, I guess would there be a motion to approve with those dates added and the numbers of copies changed? And then as well, you'll note too, Mindy, that there is a 2-week period where people can ask questions too, and we can issue like an updated information or requirement. And so Clara will keep a keen ear out for that as far as like an excess abundant amount of information, or whether we can, you know, ask for specific things, correct? Okay.
I would make a motion to approve the 3-mile trail extension pre-construction engineering request for proposal with the dates added and the number of copies added, which will be publicized per East Bay Township purchasing policy.
Okay, is there support? I will support that. Further discussion?
Can I
Sure.
offer a friendly amendment to that we get section 6 point,
Oh, yeah, you wanted
That's
something
right.
pulled out.
Sure.
6.5 put out as an individual page to be signed by a executive of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
would-
we can easily do that.
Add that to the changes.
Changes, okay. Elizabeth, that works for TART as well?
Those are all great suggestions.
Okay. Sounds good, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed by no. Okay, motion passes. It's exciting, it's gonna be a lot of work.
Yeah, we're really excited and thrilled to see it moving forward, and a proud partner to be working with the township to make these connections. action's happening, so thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you both. Okay, with that, we will move on to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund 19-0071, Holiday Woodlands. This is an application. Chris, you want to make your way up? And you feel free to have a seat or stand at the podium, whatever you're more comfortable with. But this is the township application where we were mentored through the Conservancy, I think you'd say, on this acquisition. It was granted. It's been a long process. Chris and I have had several phone calls over this over the couple of years, but we've gotten through every step and we're getting close to acquisition. So it goes through some of that in your packet. This did come back to the Parks Commission. As you know, one of the things with this project was that it didn't have a financial obligation or ask from the township, and that was due solely because of the equity based on one of the projects. The equity was being donated in the purchase price. What impacted that is not the purchase agreement. That owner is still doing that very same thing, and as a matter of fact, that amount's grown. But what's impacted it is just the housing or the real estate values that we've all seen escalate through COVID since about 2020 to current. And so that came back to the Parks Commission, what that gap would be as we're getting closer to closing. The Parks Commission took a look at it. You can see the motion here as well. There is just a real brief overview of a PowerPoint just to remind you of the project, and then what the balance sheet was that they looked at that has their future parkland purchase line item is at $824.75, which was largely built up over the past 4 to 5 years. They discussed it at their meeting. I listened to it while I was traveling. It was very interesting to listen to. My connection died just as they were making a motion, so that about killed me. And then I was out of connection for a couple hours. But anyway, they did vote to approve that expenditure out of that line item. And with that, I'll let Chris go through a lot more of the highlight than just the money stuff, but what we've done over the past couple years.
Yeah, this started in the fall of 2018. It's when the original public meetings about the potential projects started. We applied to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund at the beginning of April 2019. At that time, we had two of the properties, the Holiday Woodlands Preserve and the Nolan property, under option. So we had those exclusive right to purchase those properties. There was the third property that was initially included in the application. It was an active real estate listing, and we were still negotiating that at the time that we submitted the grant proposal. We had it appraised. It was listed for about 25% over appraised value. After quite a bit of back and forth through the realtor, the listing agent convinced the seller to sell it to him for the appraised value of $4,000 an acre. And so we ended up modifying our application. We felt pretty comfortable with that because the aspects of the project that would provide the points under the scoring system for the trust fund weren't really impacted by having that property in or out. We just figured if we could have the extra 50 acres and it would get us all the way down to Property Road, that was, it just provided some more flexibility in terms of trail system and parking and that sort of thing. So we had, because of that initial appraisal work on that southernmost property, we estimated the value of all these properties at $4,000 an acre. And as Beth said, given what's happened since 2020, the trust fund approved our grant proposal in December of 2019. the legislature then has to release those funds, and they didn't do that prior to, they have to pass a bill to do that, and the governor has to sign it. And they did not do that before March 13th, 2020, when everything sort of shut down, and it ended up, a bill didn't end up getting passed until October of 2020. By that time, the Recreational Grants Department of DNR was down 2 grant administrators, and they had a hiring freeze, all of which led to significant delay in getting this project closed. We now have a closing date set of July 19th. So far, so good. I haven't heard any negative things going on. But the last step before getting to closing was approval from the DNR to do the final appraisal on the properties. And after this delay and this surge in value due to COVID, the final appraisal numbers came in right around $7,800 an acre, so nearly double what they were at the time we applied. And we had some buffer built in, as Beth indicated. The Holiday Woodlands Preserve had agreed to sell the property for the amount that they needed to pay off the loans that they'd taken out to buy the property. So that bargain sale, as properties increased in value, that bargain sale would get bigger. It would offset the cost of property values going up to a certain point, and we just didn't expect this big a drop, or this big of a gain. So also, you know, the Conservancy at the time, as Beth said, when we entered into this, it wasn't going to cost the township anything. The Conservancy had, we had about $108,000 in project costs budgeted for preparing the grant application, raising matching funds, negotiating with landowners, all those sorts of things, some environmental due diligence, and various other costs. And one of the things that happened due to the delay is that in order for Holiday Woods property not to go into foreclosure, we had to continue making monthly option payments, and that added about $25,000 to our budget. So we were up to nearly $135,000, and we still have a gap, a cash gap at closing of 49, at least as of with the preliminary closing packet, $49,244, and that's what we talked to the Parks and Rec Commission or Committee last month, just to explore the idea of ways that we close the gap, and they offered a resolution to bring up to $49,500 from their land acquisition fund to cover that gap. So that's very much appreciated. The fundraising on this project has been difficult. Yeah, I guess with that, I know now that this is just, I guess, to ratify the recommendation from the Commission to spend that money. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about where we're at, how we got here.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Just a couple of things I might note really quick. When we went through that grant application and they do the scoring and it comes back where you rank, we were kind of too close to the bottom, and we looked back at the application and we're like, what aren't we communicating? And that grant cycle allows you the opportunity to go back and stress the areas that are pertinent to them. And after we did that, we were the 5th highest ranking project in the state. And so when we went to the DNR Trust Fund or watched that meeting, while you're never positive, that something will happen. We were pretty darn close that it would get, pretty darn sure that it would get funded because we were so close to the top. So that was really interesting. We were hitting the marks of what they wanted to see in an acquisition property, and I think that that's important. I also thought that the discussion at the Parks Commission was really important and kind of embodied really the partnership that has been of this project, saying, I mean, from the property owner, this has been an extended period of time, so these property owners are, waiting for this to get done too. So they've been a partner coming along with this, wanting to see it finished. The Conservancy has continually kicked in more money and expertise. And for me, it was, I think, positive to see the Road Commission. We could call the Road Commission. Do we think of that? No. To see the Parks Commission fund that as well too. The Parks Commission recently went through kind of prioritizing some of their projects out there, and it was interesting because land acquisition has always been very important to them. As you can see, they built up pretty good in the past 4 to 5 years for that. But at the same time, they also said it was ranked on their lowest recent priority because they didn't see anything on the horizon that they needed to spend it on immediately. And so I think that that was part of the reason too that they were fine with doing this project, because they have the opportunity then to take the remaining amount in that fund, which I think was $20-some-odd thousand, and build that up again over time. But with that, does anyone have any questions for Chris or for myself?
I just have a couple little questions. First off, the 2 pieces of property that we're looking at, how many acres is that total?
It's 145 acres.
Okay, so $50,000 is a pretty good buy. Since the third parcel is out and kind of sounds like it's out, and that was kind of the plan where the parking was going to be part of it, are there any plans for improving the parking that's now for this parcel?
That's really it's really up to the township where they want to do that. We thought Prouty Road, that was an opportunity that might make it a little easier. Right now, Holiday Woods property has access off a 5-mile road. There's a driveway out. Their parking lot's pretty small. It might require driveway up to where there's the property opens up to put a parking lot up there. But there's plenty of opportunity to discuss those things. There's also there are other public access points around the property from the Holiday Hills side. But yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity to.
Okay.
And namely, this backs up to Mount Holiday, which is a pretty big deal for this property. Those are good questions on that third most southern piece that dropped out. We had talked before they had even finalized, I think, the sale, or just after. Maybe it was just after, because I remember being, pretty disappointed about that. Now I'm pretty thankful because we'd be in a different situation, right, with all of those rising appraisals. But we talked with a gentleman that develops trails and had actually volunteered he does it professionally and works, I think, doesn't he work with you guys too, or?
He was a former employee, but he does still work with us.
And we had him take a look at that parcel and say, how upset should we be about this? And he's like, there could be some benefits to that parcel, but he said it's really tough with the terrain to really enhance that property with the trail there. So he said I wouldn't be too awful upset. I think you still have plenty of opportunities with the other 2 parcels. Yeah.
Well, my only concern is that parking area now, kind of off of 5 Mile, is not adequate for a park of 100 and some acres. And so long as you have that in the discussion in the future, that's kind of where you're headed, that's good.
Yeah. Actually, if I could just take a second to have Claire maybe hop up here real quick and talk about some of the just really rough initial plans we were talking about, which is looking towards some community grants for some planning. and this isn't ever going to be a very highly developed, this is going to be a trail parcel. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I can't speak to the design as much as the process. So we're looking at seeking some funding to hire a consultant that would lead a community engagement process to really work with, all types of potential users of the property and really figure out where the access locations would be, where the parking locations would be, where, there's definitely opportunities for foot traffic and foot access with all of the surrounding neighborhoods. So we had put together kind of a scope of what we wanted that public planning process to look like. And so we're definitely moving forward with that as we finalize the acquisition.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, a question I have is, I've been down on that trail a couple times. You can get onto it past the water tower, and it's a Holiday North, or no, Holiday,
Forest,
huh?
Holiday Forest.
Okay.
And the
There are
new
two
part,
different
too.
areas, either at the water tower or down the bottom of the hill, there's a spot. There's also two spots up in Holiday East. And one, the farthest one is where the water pump station is. So there's a lot of places, but what my thought is any of that property on Holiday Forest, any place in there, you got wide open fields in there.
Well, even in the development plan that we just passed at Planning Commission last summer, maybe, there is access trails to back there to get there. There's marked locations to get back there in the new development.
Yeah, between
Well, I think
the,
what I was looking at is probably for parking, like Matt had said, well, you got an area that's big enough to handle the parking.
I think the point at the time from the planning commission was you're going to have people accessing that parcel anyway, you may as well plan for it. So they do have a spot in between some of the lots there to access that. I gotta tell you, when taking a look back through like the presentation and the process and the length that this has been, I don't even know that Chris knows this. When the Conservancy brought this project to the township, I was not particularly sold at first. It wasn't until I saw the DNR, the MDOT's 2045 future transportation plan that this really spoke to me personally, because it noted in Grand Traverse County that two of the highest growing places are Blair Township and that area of like 4 to 5 mile area northeast part of the township is some of the highest intensity growth. And then I think you'll see the stats in here of where Grand Traverse County is on some of the growth stats. So to know that this is one of the most intense places in the state on top of that, it made a whole lot of sense then to start taking a look at this, not in the short term, but for a couple generations down the pike. And then, of course, the economics played into this project a whole lot, and cannot give enough kudos and appreciation to everybody who is behind the scenes that you don't see here tonight, that are, the owners of the property, the people who have donated, the people at the Conservancy who have worked on this. So it's been good. Yeah.
A, I'm totally for this, but B, I thought, and maybe I'm totally wrong, that we can't give money to another agency. So are we gonna be on the deed? How is that gonna work?
What do you mean we can't give money to another agency?
We can't give money to a nonprofit. We
You
can't
need a
give money-
contract or something.
So we're purchasing it through the
So
DNR
we're
grant
gonna be on the deed?
acquisition. Yeah, we'll be the property owners.
Yeah.
Okay, then never mind.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So originally, had this gap funding not become an issue, we would have gone to closing with just 10% of the project. So the DNR trust fund will fund all of what they expect to accept, they do a 10% holdback. And that's until you get every last hoop jump through, and then they'll forward that last 10%. So say you had no money required, which doesn't really happen very often, does it? But we would just go to closing with 10%. If this motion passes, we'll go to closing with the up to 49.5 plus the 10%. And then that 10% will be reimbursed to us through the state. The only thing that we have into this to date, other than time, is 2 appraisals, about $2,000 each, that we fronted the cost of during this process.
I just was concerned that we were giving money to another nonprofit to buy the property, and I didn't think we could do that. But if we're on the deed, I have no problem with that. The only question I have is that 49.5, is that enough? Because we don't know exactly, because July 19th is still a month away, and, is it really, 50,100?
So is everything
Well,
locked
He's-
in?
Yeah, the final appraisal numbers are set. The sellers have signed the draft closing packet, so all that is set. There's still a possibility if the closing gets moved a few days, one way or another, the tax proration will be off. That's why right now the amount would be 49,244, and that's why the Parks Commission said not to exceed 49.5, so that there's a little bit of wiggle room. And frankly, if for some reason it goes a few thousand over, we're a lot more nimble than the township. We can scrounge up a few $1,000 if we need to cover that last bit.
Yeah.
Okay. You ready for a motion?
Sure.
I'll make a motion to approve the May 16, 2022 Parks Commission recommendation of allocating up to $49,500 for the acquisition approval of MNRTF 19-0071.
Support.
Okay, motion has been made and supported. I am going to ask for a second motion after that, so hold on for a second, and that's just for authorization of us to issue the check for us to go to closing. But with that, for the motion that Mindy just stated, any further discussion? Motion made by Walters and supported by Lyle. Ann, you want to do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Walters?
Yes.
Lyle?
Yes.
Escortade?
Yes.
Bartlett?
Yes.
M. Cortade?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes. Okay, with that, I would like to get the prior advance, okay, for cutting that check for the escrow, the 10% escrow amount. This gives me the ability to write the check for the 49.5, to okay that and go through, and then you'll see that come back through the financials. But I want to make sure that that 10%, that the township's aware of that, and then we can cut that check.
So it will
What
be
is that amount?
I don't have
I
the,
think it's
do we?
58,400. There might be a little.
plus the 49.5, so like 90, just under 100,000?
Can we, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, I don't know if you want one check or 2 checks. That's
We can do one check, but if you just say for a motion to approve the 10% escrow, I guess you would say advance to be reimbursed by the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund. Do you have an amount?
Yeah, 584,800.
500 and,
I missed that.
Sorry, 584,800.
So it'd be 10% of the
10% of that.
584.
Yeah, so
584.8.
so no more than 55,000, right?
58,480.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought he said 54,000.
584,800.
60,000, no more than 60,000, sorry,
That's what
sorry.
I'm saying, about 100,000.
Go with that, Mindy, then just go with that.
I'll make a motion to approve the 10% escrow to go to closing for the, is it the MNRTF 19-0071 for up to $60,000?
Support.
Okay, motion made by Walters, supported by M. Cortade. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Motion carries. Chris, thank you.
thank you.
This has been a long road.
Yeah, back to that. I had to resist the urge to knock on the lectern when I said it's going to close until I'm going to do so.
I'm not sure that's wood anyway, so don't worry about it.
Anyway, yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. And also extend our appreciation to Glenn Chown, too.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, with that, we will move on to short-term rental moratorium ordinance. Let me just catch up here real quick. Okay, we last saw this at the April 11th Board of Trustees meeting, where we looked at a temporary moratorium ordinance for short-term rentals. Again, Claire, I'm going to have you come sit up here and visit with us. But recall that this is not for any changes at this point to the short-term rental license ordinance. This is a moratorium ordinance, which would put a halt on issuing additional licenses. Go ahead, Claire, if you would like to recap.
Okay. So I'll back up just to one meeting before, that was back in October of 2021. The Township Board had a joint planning discussion with the Planning Commission to discuss possible changes to the short-term rental licensing ordinance. So the feedback that we received was that there was support for looking at potential amendments. There was support for a layered approach, possibly including distance separation between all new short-term rentals, looking at a cap on total number of licenses permitted in the township, and/or limiting the total number of licenses a certain individual can obtain. So just so you know, we're currently working with legal counsel to draft proposed amendments to bring back to the board. And so that's happening kind of concurrently and will continue to happen, you know, with or without this proposed moratorium. However, we are seeing that we are continuing to have more and more licenses that are coming before the township. When we came before you in October, there was 127 short-term rental licenses. As of today, right before the meeting, we're up to 154 short-term rental licenses.
Can you repeat those numbers for me?
We were at 127 in October, and we're up to 154. So in order to work through these proposed changes, your board reviewed the temporary moratorium back in April, and so we're recommending enacting this temporary moratorium to allow the township to work through these amendments and take a look at the cap. The moratorium would be for a 6-month period, with the opportunity to extend that through an additional ordinance, depending on the amount of time that it takes to work through the ordinance. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I also have our zoning administrator, Preston Taylor, is here, and he's been fielding a lot of the phone calls from residents, and so he's happy to come and summarize some of the concerns that our planning and zoning department has been hearing in relation to short-term rentals.
Preston, you're welcome to sit down if you like, so we don't hurt our necks looking up at you there.
I will stand if that's all right.
That is absolutely all right.
So, members of the board, I asked specifically to be able to come address you on some of the concerns that have been brought to the office, pretty much primarily over the phone over the last 30 days. As word got around, circulated of the moratorium tonight, the phone was ringing pretty much nonstop, was lots of questions. What does a moratorium mean? What does this mean for our future in the township? And kind of broke this down in a couple groups. And the number one concern that I heard from residents is that especially particular neighborhoods, a couple particular neighborhoods, that the number of short-term rental licenses that were being issued were changing the feel of the actual neighborhood. One woman said she lived there since the 70s, and she said it's nothing like it was then. Tour buses coming and going, and you don't get to know your neighbors because it's new people all the time. And so just that was overwhelmingly the primary concern, was that the change of the feel of the neighborhood and the concentration of short-term rental licenses in a couple of these specific neighborhoods. There were a couple concerns of government overreach and that there shouldn't be an ordinance on it anyway. Those were only a few dozens of calls on the actual process for getting a short-term rental license and walking them through that online platform and the ordinance. And then I had, and I thought this was interesting and noteworthy to be brought up, is two suggestions. Two different people called. Actually, one came in addition to the phone call, was a board, some type of board coming together. How that was made up could be someone from the township, residents of the township. That board could help guide this board through a decision-making process if there was a moratorium in place, and how that could guide you to a decision-making at the end of that moratorium, as well as a standing board afterwards that could meet on some type of basis, quarterly or whatever, to express concerns, talk about ways to better manage any type of complaints that have come up. And the one gentleman who's quite knowledgeable in this field said to even be another layer of, or a watchdog, another type of watchdog, if there is an area where there's continued problems regarding short-term rental licenses. So again, just wanted to be able to convey that the concerns with the public on that concentration in certain areas, and that their hope was that that could be spread out and not so concentrated in these 2 or 3 different neighborhoods.
And one of those was Pine Grove, which was mentioned in a memo in the board packet, correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, with that, I am gonna open it up to public comment, but first I want to see if there's any initial clarifying questions from the board to Claire or to Preston. Go ahead, Mindy.
So in the email correspondence we had a couple people suggest that we have a fee, a per person fee that would help to deal with things in the lakes, invasive species, that kind of thing. And it's my understanding that we cannot do that. Is that correct?
That is my understanding as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? Okay, with that, we will open this subject up to public comment. To come make public comment, you're welcome to come to the podium, stand up. And when there are several people, if you will just line up one after the other. If you want to speak and you see the other person, there's no one, please come up and stand behind them so we can hear everybody and keep things rolling. With that, I'll just remind everybody that the public comment rules that Ann went over for the initial public comment are the same ones for this public comment as well, too. Hello, and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, my name is Carrie Sechrist, and I have lived in Pine Grove subdivision at 816 Indian Trail Boulevard since for over 40 years. Let's put it that way. Okay, the realtor said, well, this is a real nice starter home. And it was my first home, and I thought, I don't want a starter home. I want a home that if I want to live there the rest of my life, I'm going to be happy. And she says, people don't do that. They get starter homes. And I said, no, I know people who've gotten starter homes and they've never gotten out of them. And they are unhappy. So I found my dream home, and I love my home. I love my neighborhood. We have people that I've met who I never thought I would know because they're walking their dogs. But when you have people streaming through and screaming through the neighborhood, fast cars, loud parties, fireworks going over your head because of people with Airbnbs, it certainly changes the scene of things. I've chose my neighborhood because it's so close to Traverse City, and now we have the Tart Trail. It's a wonderful place to be and live. But I'm so concerned about what's happening in our neighborhood, I could cry. There are so many Airbnbs and irresponsible people who rent them out. It makes people who want to get that starter home, like our pastor, brand new pastor, wants to move into the neighborhood, can't find any place to buy because people are putting it out at a certain rate, and he asks for that rate, he'll go for that. But they end up selling because these people will pay $70,000 to $125,000 more than it's actually worth because they're going to make money off of it, and they don't care. And they don't care about having literally on the next block, and I'm on the corner, 100 people at a party on Labor Day weekend, 100 party with a band. This is not right, and this is not going to make people come and want to live in our area, but they can't even afford to live in it. And there are so many. I wish you guys would have the numbers. You must know how many people. It's saturated. And then there's people who are saying, well, I don't know, but I'm going to be renting out my house. I've been approved. And you go and say, you're in your house? Well, no, a room. Or I'll just live with my mother or my sister and rent the whole house out. What does that happen to our neighborhood? Those people don't care, and they're running up and down our streets, and I just wish you would look and see how saturated we are and see how damaging it is to our neighborhood that we love. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir, how are you this evening? Could you introduce yourself, maybe pull that mic down? Awesome.
My name is Mike Iruli. I reside at 928 Tamarack Street in East Bay Township in the Pine Grove neighborhood. I encourage and fully support a moratorium on the granting of short-term rental licenses starting tonight. I believe the following changes in the short-term ordinance are also warranted. 1, a distance limit between short-term rentals, 1,000 to 2,000 feet, with the former being the bare minimum. 2, a density limit within the township that is capped at less than what is now registered. When the SDRs drop off the roll due to attrition, the cap will be stabilized at a desired number. This will provide for return to a residential neighborhood instead of a hotel zone that we are currently experiencing. 3, short-term rental can only be rented for no less than 90 continuous days. This will put an end to the revolving door that is currently occurring within our residential neighborhoods and a source of income for the owner of a short-term rental. 4, the owner, agent, or entity shall only be allowed one property as a short-term rental, as well as barring any corporations or limited liability corporations from holding a single or multiple STR license for said properties. None of these things I've suggested are my original ideas. The board only has to look toward the short-term rental ordinance that Traverse City has in place and gain insight and information regarding these. The current ordinance as written favors the short-term rental and the owner of said properties, not the neighborhood or residential property owners. This has to stop. Potential loss of education dollars to the sum of $8,700 per student for our local schools due to the proliferation of short-term rentals is unsupportable if we truly want to educate our children and our future. The original ordinance states that the intent, and I quote, protect the integrity of residential neighborhoods which were developed with the intent of single-family occupancy. This has not happened, and measures need to be taken to ensure that this intent is realized. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir? Oh, you know what? We don't show anything like that, so I appreciate that. Come on up, sir.
My name is Dave Burke, and I reside at 655 Arbutus Trail. So I'm a resident of East Bay Township. I also have a short-term rental 2 doors away. And I'd like to assure the lady that we do everything we can to keep the noise level down. I don't think we've had any complaints. I know other short-term rental owners that, and in fact, I think it's in the ordinance that you can call if there's excessive noise and they have to have somebody there to take immediate action. I would like to comment that I think there's a bill in the state legislature prohibiting short-term rentals because the feeling is that it limits property rights excessively. Now, I tend to agree with that, obviously, but
So on that basis, I suggest a moratorium, but a different type of moratorium. I suggest a moratorium, meaning considering changes to the short-term rental ordinance, because if the bill does pass in the legislature, the short-term ordinance is going to be moot. I'm not an attorney, but that's the conclusion that I think is realistic. What I suggest the moratorium be, that you in fact do a moratorium on charging to issue short-term rental licenses for the sake of, and I base this upon recent actions that have taken place in Peninsula Township. Peninsula Township had a federal judge decide in favor of the vineyards out there against the township. And a lot of their regulations were overreaching government control. Now, they also are going to be taken to court for the tune of either, depends which article you read, $200 or $300 million in lost business. In other words, Peninsula Township officials, and hence the taxpayers of Peninsula Township, are going to be liable for that amount if it's decided in their favor. As a taxpayer of East Bay Township, I don't want to be liable for any suit that's brought up against East Bay Township because they're doing something illegal and overreaching. So that's could lead to a contingency. So I suggest that you declare a moratorium on charging right now as a goodwill gesture to the state if they do pass that law. Now, granted, the law may not pass, so what you do is just maintain a list of people that are being not charged temporarily and then retroactively charge them. I think the township needs to realize the potential liability for this. I don't want the township sued, but a good lawyer could make a lot of money out of it because there is a tremendous loss of business with the township prohibitions that exist now. Though I do commend the township because I do think we need some regulation too.
Thank you.
I thought you did a terrific job with the existing ordinance, and I think the lady that was up here from Pine Grove had an excellent point that you need to limit noise control.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, so thank you.
Hello, could you introduce yourself?
Good evening. My name is Ray Drager, and I live at 967 South Hobbs Highway, and I own 2 short-term rental licenses right now. And I thank the board for, the ordinance. Originally, I was opposed to it, but I do see that there needs to be a balance for both sides, and I think we've achieved that. There's always tweaks here and there, but I'm opposed to a moratorium because I do believe that's an overreach, a government overreach, and it is intrusive. Also, I think there's going to be significant consequences, both intended and unintended, for a moratorium, especially with the way the economy is going right now. Who thought they were going to be paying $5 a gallon for gas? Yeah. There's a few of you out there that are, looking at a book.
We'll keep your comments directed to the board.
Yeah. And so I want you to think about the bigger picture and the appropriateness of the moratorium to study the ordinance. At this time, I think it's inappropriate. We have skyrocketing interest rates. We have people that are going to be suffering greatly in 2023 with economic ruin in many ways. Some of these people are paying, top dollar for their mortgage rates. And that's going to cause things to happen just like in 2008, where we had foreclosures, we had people that are losing money that had planned on it. I just think this is the wrong time to do something like this. I would ask the board just to table this for a year, to 2023 next summer, look at the economic situation, because the unintended consequences is, the township will lose tax revenue if we start going and suffering into dark economic times. So I think right now is not the time to do this. I think we have, only 10 reported complaints within a 2-year period. 8 of them were unsubstantiated, 2 were substantiated. So I would take my hat off to the hosts and the owners and their selection of their guests. I feel bad for Pine Grove. I don't know the facts to that, but facts, Mr. Preston, I think you can say something about how many complaints we've had reported. And that's what I'm looking at, not just, what people are saying, but what has actually been reported, the data. And so at this point, I just want to say again, I'm opposed to the moratorium on a number of issues, but it's truly not the time to do this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Go ahead and step up. And Preston, are you going to make me call you Mr. Preston now? Okay. I was just wondering if that name was going to stick. Hello, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Wayne Kiley, 2899 Riverbend. We have a place right on the Boardman River and been renting it in short-term rentals for many years. And I would just hate to give the impression that, based upon previous speakers, that we're all lumped in the same category. In our situation, we've never had a complaint, ever. Every time, there's a rating system, we consistently get 5-star ratings. I know we have afforded families opportunities that would never have in coming to Traverse City and sitting in a hotel room on the edge of a bed. I mean, having that river experience, and it's changed the lives of a lot of people that have come back regularly. One of the couples bought a lot from me and my other subdivision out in Sutton's Bay. Right now they're building a home that's spending over $1 million on a home there. And I would say that probably wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been coming here consistently and having this amazing experience. So my feeling is, I'm not in favor of a moratorium. I think it becomes unfair. I think if there's a problem in a community, then it becomes an enforcement issue. And I think there's zoning administrators, there's law enforcement, and there's a potential to revoke licenses based upon noncompliance. I don't think everybody should be punished because of the actions of a few. And it is the responsibility of the host to regulate and make sure that things do not get out of control. So that's my primary feelings. I would just hate to see it revoked and a moratorium put in place at this time. I think the previous speaker made a good point as to giving it some time to sort out, particularly given the economic situation. And thank you for all the time you've put into putting an ordinance in place that, for the most part, has served the community well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Hello, how are you? Could you introduce yourself, please?
My name is Michelle Whitcup, and my husband was born in East Bay Township, and we have both lived here most of our lives. So we're very familiar with the area, and we have traveled extensively. We have utilized Airbnbs, VRBOs, so we're really familiar with the whole short-term rental process. And I really have no problem with short-term rentals, but I do have a problem with the density issue. And we do live in Pine Grove area, 823 Indian Trail Boulevard. And we live in the Pine Grove area. I understand the draw to our area. I live and I work here, although my company is in New York City. I am blessed to live in Traverse City. And I understand the draw with being near the bay, being near the Tart Trail. I get it. But what I don't get is when we have in our small area from Tom's to 3 Mile and from Parsons to the bay, over 25 rental areas. And that was, in speaking to Claire, just last October. And now you have 27 more leases, and how many of them are in our area? I can tell you, I know that there are probably at least 5, maybe more, of those leases are in our area. So I do agree that it is overabundant. I don't think that we need to stop this entirely, but we do need to have some boundaries around it. And when we talk about moratoriums, I would hope that you would extend that to whenever a resolution is reached. 6 months isn't going to be enough. If you started talking about this in October, with all due respect, we've only gotten, we're at June, it's been 8 months, and we've only gotten this far. So I doubt that in 6 months, you're going to be able to complete what needs to be done in that time frame. So I would encourage you to do the moratorium. My understanding is that those people who have short-term rentals can still renew or keep their rental. It's just not new people coming in. And that it will be, a consideration of all the things that have already been discussed and talked about. But in the meantime, we won't have new people coming in. And that's what I hope would be something to be considered. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
I'm Jill Bernardi. I live at 5826 Rennie View Road. I do not own a short-term rental. I don't intend to own a short-term rental, so I have nothing financially to gain. I would like to say that the premise of you being sued for millions of dollars because of a winery verdict in another township is ridiculous, so scratch that one off your list, I'm going to guess. Gentleman named Mr. Drager would like you to table this until next year, until he is hopefully sitting in one of your chairs, because I think he's on the ballot. I definitely think that one can be scratched off your list. Rentals have been around, as we all know, since we were little kids, right? You'd go in the newspaper, you'd look for a rental, you'd tear it out, you'd call, and you wondered what it would look like when you got there. And maybe one was filled with mice, maybe it wasn't. But rentals have been around forever. You're not banning rentals. You're just limiting how many are going to be out there for us. That's all that that's all the motion is. That's all people are asking. Just limit it and keep it reasonable. That's what the moratorium, I believe, is going to be placed for, so that you guys can get your arms around and figure out what's reasonable. So I support that, so that you can figure it out and get it right. That's all. No one's asking to have them banned. Just make it reasonable, because now there's an exorbitant amount of them, and it's too much. 2 nights ago, I think, on our lake, one rental who has 5 stars. There's never any complaints. Enforcement would be impossible. They were so loud. They're showing off fireworks. They're having parties. They're zooming back and forth. One rental on our lake caused havoc for everybody. That's just one. We're a small lake. But other lakes that have a crazy intense number versus other places, it can't be fun. The other thing is, there are limits across the country, all over the country. So you putting some kind of limits here, you're just following suit. So please, just get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, how are you all?
Good, how are you?
Good. Stacy Slater, 854 Pine Grove. Thanks again for having public comment. I just wanted to encourage the board to please consider a moratorium, and also to echo Ms. Witkoff's comments. This needs to happen sooner than later. I know last summer I had stopped in here and we talked about Steamboat Springs. So a year ago, or January 21, they started a moratorium, and they've extended it a couple of times. As of May, they've extended again because of the time needed. So again, I encourage you to hastily start considering this. And their comments were, again, not unique to Steamboat. We've seen it in Sedona and all other places. And the bill, which is very concerning about banning or prohibiting townships and municipalities from regulating short-term rentals. I don't know what the latest is on that. I haven't gotten good response from our representatives' offices. But what they were saying is, at the last city council meeting in Steamboat, this was in May, councilors proposed a moratorium on nightly rentals to try to mitigate the impacts of tourism. Essentially, the city would take a break from issuing any more short-term rental licenses until it can develop a plan to go forward. This would be a 6-month break, it's been a year and a half now, where no new rental licenses could be issued until regulations can be developed. By placing a moratorium, the city or the township is acknowledging that there's various issues because of over-tourism, including the loss of affordable housing, traffic, impacts on residents, et cetera. As we know, the Pine Grove residents neighborhood is not built for the party bus every weekend, and I've sent pictures to Mr. Taylor, and I thank him for meeting with my husband and I personally. The stretch limos every weekend, Thursday through Sunday, it's the party bus. And we basically close ourselves up inside of our house Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So whether it's fireworks, noise, the owner who lives out on Old Mission, was telling me how wonderful he was going to make it. Well, it's essentially a parking lot on Ann Street every weekend. It's a parking lot. 6, 7, 8 cars or more. What used to be lawn and lovely flowers is now dirt. So we are pretty much prisoners in our homes. There is no B&B. These are commercial enterprises. This is not mom and pop renting out their rooms a couple times. This is a commercial enterprise that we are not getting any value out of as property owners. So, thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, please feel free to make your way up. Carol, if you want to just come up and be ready to be at the podium.
Hello, my name is Teresa Giorgiani. I live at 820 Indian Trail Boulevard in the Pine Grove neighborhood. I've been living there for over a decade, and I chose this neighborhood very carefully because I wanted to live in a safe, quiet neighborhood where I can walk my dogs, I could ride my bike nearby, and feel safe, where there was a variety of ages, age groups in the neighborhood. And I have gotten to know a lot of my neighbors. I love my neighbors. I love my neighborhood. What's happening to it is unacceptable. Our master plan for our neighborhood says that this will be a community where all areas of life, from people starting a family and growing old and looking for retirement and being able to stay in that same neighborhood. This is not indicative of our master plan. It makes it unsafe. I walk that neighborhood with my dogs quite often. I'm very familiar with the house that has multiple neighbors on cars on Ann Street. I've been met by some of those people and told by one that they would be the worst neighbors that I ever saw, and they kept their promise. The fireworks do not extend or are not limited to holidays. They are during the weeks, on the weekends. I've had fireworks land in my yard. There's party lights. They do not shut off at 10 o'clock. They're on all night long. I have a floodlight that goes into my house, and that is going to be an Airbnb. And I've asked for the floodlight to be redirected and to have shade put over that, and that has not happened. I just don't feel that this is indicative of a safe neighborhood. Some streets in our neighborhood now have more rentals and Airbnbs than people that live there all year round. That's not indicative of a safe family neighborhood where we get to continue to know who our neighbors are. I have neighbors that if something happens, I know I can reach out to them, and they've done it for me. I can't do that if my neighbor's a party house. Not only can I not reach out to them, but I don't feel safe. I love my area. I moved there for a reason. And I hope that East Bay Township not only extends the moratorium, but looks for at least 2 years. Because as someone previously said, this is not going to get cleared up in 6 months. I hope this is a beginning of discussion between East Bay Township and the residents that actually live there all year round, so that we can come to a reasonable conclusion. And I would like to see the limit in our neighborhood in the low single digits. It's excessive right now, and I just would like it to go back to a nice, safe community.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also have my neighbor, I understand I can't read.
Correct. You can hand that to Ann, and she'll get that to the rest of the board. Thank you.
Good evening, Carol Kusel from East Bay Township resident and voter. Please recall these facts based on information from the fall of 2021. As Claire, your planner, has already informed you this evening that these numbers have increased since those numbers were available. 46, this is from the fall of 2021, 46 of the 126 licensed East Bay Township short-term rentals at that time were on Spider Lake. That's 36.5% of all the short-term rentals in the township. However, when including the rental cottages on Spider Lake that are on Cabin Court properties, Spider Lake has a whopping total of 86 cabins rented on a short-term basis. Those properties can add approximately 600 people per day to the lake community. So you see, Spider Lake has an exorbitant amount of short-term rentals compared to other East Bay Township communities, including all of the lakes in the Forest Lakes region. As you know, short-term rentals bring both bonuses and challenges to our community. The challenges have been extensively outlined by your planning and zoning staff and expressed by multiple township citizens, not only this evening, but in past meetings. I won't attempt to summarize them. Rather, I will say that with the greatest number of short-term rentals on the Spider Lake community is experiencing the brunt of those challenges. At times, those challenges negatively impact the safety and the quality of life for Spider Lake riparians and guests on Spider Lake. Because of the disproportionate distribution of short-term rentals and their corresponding challenges, I strongly urge you to vote for the temporary moratorium ordinance for short-term rentals, and then to revise the short-term ordinance so that any neighborhood, especially the Spider Lake neighborhood, that it doesn't become so densely populated by short-term rentals. I also encourage you to strengthen the rules for safe upkeep of the rental properties and orderly conduct of the renters. Lastly, I thank you, Mindy, for bringing up the question about
Ma'am, we're going to just direct everything to the board, not pull out any individual board members.
I'm sorry, she addressed this evening about the I thank you for the question earlier about the taxation for supporting of AIS. But nonetheless, I still ask you to consider that the increase of guests on our lakes brings an increase in the potential spread of AIS. So right now, the burden of spotting and stopping and treating AIS falls on the riparians. So please, find ways to support efforts to stop and spot the spread of AIS in our township. I thank you for the work that you do and for considering my comments.
Thank you. Sir, how are you tonight?
Good, thank you.
Your name and?
My name is John Jury. I'm a resident of East Bay Township at 1615 East River Road. I am a short-term rental owner, and I've been involved in the short-term rental process since we started, 2-3 years ago with the development of the current ordinance. I am adamantly opposed to a moratorium. What I am in favor of is that the township starts enforcing the ordinance. We obviously have some very concerned and legitimate concerned neighbors, my neighbors in the community, that are having some problems in their neighborhoods. Everything that they have brought up this evening seems like it's already been documented in my requirements and any other STR owner's requirements to obtain a license. And if you're not adhering to the ordinance requirements of the license, you're going to be penalized up to revocation of your license. Hearing that a short-term rental owner, licensed owner, is allowing their guests to have 100-person party is absolutely ridiculous, and that should be automatic revocation. We as short-term rental owners need to be stewards of our neighborhoods. I vet my guests. I've never had a complaint. I have other friends that are STR owners. We've never had complaints. The review system, you're right. Everybody gets a 5-star. It means nothing, not to my neighbor. So I don't think that an ordinance is necessary, or I'm sorry,
Moratorium.
moratorium is necessary. We simply have to start holding our license holders to the fire and make sure that they are adhering to the rules and regulations of the ordinance and their license. And what are we paying host compliance for? What are host compliance? I can't even get them on the phone to be able to renew my license, let alone have them enforcing or giving you guys information. It astounds me that we have this many residents with this many problems. However, I'm told that we've only have 10 official complaints out of 150 some licenses. We have 10 complaints in 2 years. So something is mismatched here. We are not getting data, or there isn't a problem. The moratorium's not going to fix this. We just simply need to enforce the ordinance as it is on the books today, that we worked all so hard for 2 years to get on the books. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Ma'am?
Good evening. My name is Gail Miller, 774 Lake George Trail. We rent our family cottage for a few weeks every summer to help keep that cottage in the family. I would like to just echo everything that John just said about most of the short-term rental hosts want to have good relations with their neighbors. We have worked hard to keep our properties in good condition. At least those of us who also use our properties care very deeply about our property and our neighbors. I guess other people have spoken for and against the moratorium. I'm going to leave that alone. What I would like to recommend is that there be a map produced with all of the locations, maybe it does exist, but I haven't seen it, of all of the locations of the short-term rentals in the township. That would be very helpful. I would also suggest, and I had this conversation with Preston, I would love to see some sort of short-term rental advisory committee, hosts that are specifically in communication with the township officials to assist. I think we can assist in pressuring other hosts to comply with the ordinance, because we want, the vast majority of us, like I said, want there to be compliance to the ordinance. I want to also encourage you, as you move forward thinking about this, to keep in mind the vast difference between somebody who owns a legacy cottage like we do. I grew up in Traverse City. My mom and dad bought our cottage in the early 70s, and the way that we keep that property in our family is to rent it out for a few weeks of the year. That's vastly different than somebody who's a corporate operator who operates a property for profit. But along that same line, we have our family cottage in an LLC for liability protection, so just because a property's in an LLC does not mean that it's not a family cottage. I think that we could come up with a lot of reasonable rules to help limit the craziness that goes on. I think that many of us have ideas and could, like I said, pressure other owners of short-term rentals to comply with the rules. I guess the last thing I would ask is that the last time we did the ordinance, the original ordinance, short-term rental owners were not notified in advance. Now you have a complete list of who we are, and I would ask that we all be notified every time there's well, it doesn't have to be every time there's a hearing, but when significant things are happening regarding short-term rentals, the owners of these properties need to be involved from the get-go. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Kathy Kowaleski, and I live at 928 Tamarack in the Pine Grove neighborhood. I fully support a moratorium on short-term rental licenses. Currently, there are 6 short-term rentals within 1,000 feet of my house. Only one has ever been owner-occupied. The others have been built and/or purchased just in the last few years with the sole purpose of becoming a short-term rental. A recent Zillow listing for the Pine Grove neighborhood specifically states, "Short-term rental-friendly township." These parties that are purchasing these homes are not interested in living in our residential neighborhood. They are not interested in sending their children to school in our district. They are not interested in the long-term renter that is currently unable to find rental housing in the Traverse City area. They are not interested in maintaining our residential neighborhood. They are interested in taking advantage of East Bay Township's ordinance that allows unlimited short-term rentals with no density limits. One of the many things that's come up tonight is the complaints, the noise complaints. Last summer, we made at least seven different calls or complaints regarding noise issues with the Airbnb next door to us. And then at one point, we found out the township short-term rental hotline was not being monitored. It really was not until the hiring of Preston Taylor that the complaints that were addressed in a consistent manner. We have called the police for noise issues. We tried calling the short-term rental. They never would answer the owner. They never answer our phone calls. We've called the police. The police arrived and addressed the issues. Interestingly, when we followed up on complaints with the police, we often found they were not even officially recorded. So there is a lot of people complaining it's not being recorded, and that needs to be addressed also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mary Thompson. I live at 5551 Scout Camp Road. Thanks for everything you guys do. I just wanted to make a couple of quick points. First of all, as you know, this moratorium is not, nobody's getting their license taken away. This is, as you know, just to prevent new licenses from coming in until you guys have a chance to update the ordinance. It's specifically in light of the law from the state. However, that law is not going to ban the board or any municipality from regulating short-term rentals. It's going to ban specific things about renting them. You still can require inspections. You can still require, like other municipalities do, which I think would be a great idea for East Bay, given that there's so many, resort fees that then do go to the township and can help for pay things for like AIS, getting rid of that. So, there's lots of stuff that you can do. Nobody here is your lawyer and can interpret that case from Peninsula, from WAMP. So, you have a lawyer, you pay good money for him. Have him tell you what the risks presented are in that. I don't think there was anything about government overreaching, but there was about vagueness. And that's what you guys are trying to do, is tighten up your ordinance and get it good and get it ready in light of all the issues that are coming at you. So I'm in favor of the moratorium. And I agree with prior speakers that it should be until a new ordinance is passed. Economic hardship. I use Airbnbs. I've never had what I considered a bad Airbnb owner. I'm not at the age, I don't even know 100 people to come over and party, but, I use them. I enjoy them. I do think they are a great way to really get to know a community. And I agree with the gentleman when he said that it's great to give people an opportunity to stay on a river and to stay on a lake in the area. But, that brings up other concerns that we all have that you as our representatives will do for us, and I think those should be septic inspections. The ordinance does require an examination every 3 years. Prior to a couple of weeks ago, it was interpreted by the township as they just need to be pumped out. Well, when you're on a holding tank, you get pumped out 5 times a year. And so the township was only requiring pumping out every 3 years, proof of. Well, I think now
It's, now that it's been pointed out that that was in the ordinance, that they have to have an examination. So there's like a lot of issues you guys can bring in. Giving a moratorium gives you a chance to get all that information, get a tight ordinance together that won't be subject to a vague argument like the WOMP area, and you can do it. Thank you.
Yes. How are you?
Good, thanks. Beth Boer, 855 Avenue D. So I'm on the corner of Indian Trail and Avenue D. And we bought our house in October of 2019. So we're newer to the neighborhood. And we bought it because, honestly, it was the only house that was in our budget at the time. And we lucked out because then the prices skyrocketed 2 months later. So for us, we bought it and we were like, oh, you know what? This would be great for renting. And we didn't even think of short term initially. We thought of long term because the Coast Guard base is right there. So there are opportunities for long and short term. I don't have an answer for that. We have no plans in moving anytime soon. We're not at that place. I'm not against rentals at all, but I do think that one of the biggest things that it seems like everyone's saying is that there's lack of communication with different things, and there's lack of follow-up with a lot of things. We had an issue with one of the other corner houses had hornet's nest in the front yard. Not anywhere where it was an Airbnb house. We found it, we looked up, we tried looking for hours trying to find contact information for the owner. He lives in Chicago, that's all we could find. No information anywhere else. We finally just took a spray can over there to take it to the nest because we were the ones getting stung. My son was out in our yard, and we live, it's a kitty corner, but it's far enough away that it shouldn't have been an issue, but it was. So it's little things like that, like how do we contact Airbnb owners in our neighborhood? How do we complain to them if something's happening? We don't have any big issues. Our biggest issue is people speed down Indian Trail, and I know people say they're up late at night. We go to bed early, but they're up late at night, and people are drag racing down Indian Trail because there's no stop signs. The entire road has 0 stop signs. And well, no, I was gonna say that's not necessary. There's one. It's at Avenue E. But in the middle of the night, that's the only stop sign in the whole neighborhood. And I know everyone's like, there should be a 4-way stop at Avenue B because there's car accidents there consistently enough. But I know that that's Traverse City proper's issue, and that was kind of, I've heard from other neighbors that was kind of the thing back and forth. So that's not East Bay Township's thing. So I guess, like, for me, it would be helpful knowing that there's 2 houses that were just purchased in the last 3 months that on my road that are going to be Airbnbs, and neither of them are local owners. They live Southeast Michigan or out of state. How do I contact them if something goes on? How do I, it sounds like the complaint line wasn't working. Do I just call the police? I don't know. So working through some of those issues, I think, would be really helpful. I don't have the answers, obviously, but I'm kind of either way with things. I don't necessarily agree with the moratorium, but it's an issue, as other people already said, that there's problem-solving things that can happen with it, and there's steps that can be taken outside of it. So.
Okay, thank you. Hello, how are you?
Good evening. My name is Paul Gonzalez, 709 Munson Avenue. Speaking as an individual, I am definitely for the moratorium because I think at this time it's been about a year, 2 years or so that we've had this in place, and it's time to catch our breath. Let's figure out what's going on around here. If you pay attention to what's going on in the economy and a lot of talking heads, one of the things they point out right now is that there's a big need for alternative investments. Everybody's trying to spread their money around because of different situations. One of the main pieces of an alternative investment right now is real estate, rental real estate. You have whole organizations which have formed up primarily buying up homes and turning those things around, selling them out as individual stockholders in these corporations, and they are in turn being short-term rentals. This has now become an industry, not just an item, an industry. That's one. Number two, in the time that we first talked about even having a moratorium, which was October, and today, we're up over 26% in the number of short-term rentals. This tells me two things. Number one, people are running in to get their licenses, and number two, some people are warehousing these. So they're holding on to these licenses in the event there would be a moratorium. So that's what they're doing. Number three is that there was a suggestion that if in any future discussion about short-term rentals, we would notify all the short-term rental owners. I find that to be somewhat discriminatory. We have a process as far as how we have our meetings. We have a process as to how we notify people about what those meetings are about. To notify one group to the exclusion of the rest of the citizens would be, as I say, discriminatory. And then number four, when I talk about short-term rentals, in the time that we have had the ordinance go through, where I live on East Bay, there have been 4 homes sold. The lowest one, in round figures, went for $1 million. Every one of those homes are now short-term rentals, of those 4. 3 of them are 1, 2, 3 in a row. They're all short-term rentals at this point. And number 4, and my last point, is that we are now being, residents of at least East Bay on Munson Avenue, are being solicited by companies to professionally manage my home to be a short-term rental. This company comes from Portland, Oregon, and they are soliciting me. It's called Vacasa. They are soliciting me to turn my home into a short-term rental, and they'd be happy to manage it. So finally, let me just sum up and say it's about time we stop, take a breath, look about what the ordinance is, look about what the situation has developed, and then remedy it accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Good evening. Brandon Flensky, 660 East Arbutus, Lake Road, Traverse City. First, I'd like to thank you for having brought the moratorium to this point. As Mr. Gonzalez had suggested, it was originally brought between PC and board meeting in last October. Quite frankly, it's staggering that the number has increased 26% since that time frame. My concern is that it will continue to increase. Specifically, if I could direct your attention to the moratorium as it's written, Section 1 states, second section of that says, this ordinance shall not prohibit the renewal of short-term rental licenses that were issued by the township prior to the effective date of this ordinance. My recommendation that would be that you include the word active in that, so that we don't see another 26% increase as people that once had a short-term rental license, let it fall into inactivity, bring it back on the books because now it's a commodity, as Mr. Gonzalez just mentioned. Secondly, I would also be concerned that with the passing of this moratorium, is the township prepared to handle what happens during Prohibition, which is folks going outside and around the avenue? When this was brought up in that joint meeting between the PC and the board, it was stated that rental of this nature has always taken place in the township. They just did it under the radar. And I believe that is true, and I believe that could continue to happen. And it's a little concerning hearing that folks can't get a hold of host services, which we're paying for as a township. My understanding of that program is that they're supposed to be actively searching and monitoring anything that may be taking place as a rental outside of the program, as it's stated with the STR. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Hello, sir. Excuse me, would someone like to make a comment, please?
Hi, Hi, my name is Sue Torgerson. I live at 967 Lake Ridge Drive. I manage my sister's Airbnb in East Bay Township. So I just wanted to say I do not support the moratorium. I agree with one of the gentlemen earlier that said to impose it now, you will impose an undue hardship during an economic period where we're innovators, we're entrepreneurs, and to shut it down in the middle of tourist season right now, you're going to take away the ability for people to earn money that need it, that they can't make it back in 6 months, in the middle of January, where you don't have that ability. Every Airbnb is not the same. I've heard a lot of stories, and I do empathize with the people from Pine Grove. I just wanted to put a more positive spin on some of the Airbnbs within our area. We had the opportunity to host a family from a military family that came to our area to have her baby. I mean, came from another country that was stationed here in Michigan originally with her family and came here to have her baby and then go back to Amman, Jordan. I just hosted someone who was spending time with her husband before he was deployed to Kosovo. So when you think about the impact of the Airbnbs, it's not just people having drunken parties. This is a significant family event, and they're long-time memories that they're building. We have someone coming in 2 weeks. Their family has been coming to this area for 55 years. So they have been coming for a long time. So I just wanted to put a little bit more positive spin, and I apologize for my appearance. I was raking up pine needles at the Airbnb today and talking to my neighbors. So that's just my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Yes, sir.
Not really prepared. My name is Josh Basco. My concern is that I was under the impression.
May I have you just step a little closer?
My
Thanks.
concern for me, and maybe there's other people in my shoes, I bought a property in East Bay Township solely based on Airbnb-ing it. And it's under construction. It's a complete remodel, so it's a big investment for me because I'm not a corporation or I don't have backing by investment or, I'm a local. I live here in Traverse, from Traverse. So that maybe if there's people in my situation, if there is a moratorium, there would be an acceptance for those type of people. And there should be some regulation. I don't think mandated, but what about supporting local people and only allowing applications for local people that live here? Stop people from Chicago or New York, California, that kind of stuff. I think trying to impose it now in the middle of the season is like a poor time to do that as well. And Airbnbs do bring massive economic opportunities to the area. I don't really know what to say. I'm not really prepared. I just found out about the meeting yesterday, so that's it.
Thank you for your comment. Quick clarification. Have you already made an application?
I did, thanks.
Okay. All right. That's good enough. I just wanted to know. Thank you. Yes.
Caitlin Falensky, Arbutus Lake. I am in favor of the moratorium to rework the ordinance. It has gotten out of control. Based on tonight's comments, there are responsible, reputable STR owners, which is wonderful to hear, but unfortunately not all are managed that way. Clearly, enforcement is the issue, but we need to be pragmatic. Who and how will these violations be handled? It is not realistic for Preston to handle all of this, and our local police are short-staffed as well. There was a safety issue on our lake this past weekend from a cabin court renter. The Marine Sheriff was called, and the caller was told they were so short-staffed no one could come to the lake. This is a major safety and welfare concern. It needs to be looked at, and cabin courts need to be included as well. They now fly under the radar as a nonconformity, and they should be much more regulated and watched. Thank you for taking the time to review this.
Thank you. And sir, you've already made public comment?
I just wanted to make an additional one.
We don't allow that. Oh, we don't allow that. Don't worry, I understand you were talking about some of the legalities, and we'll get into that.
No, I wanted to retract my opposition to the short-term moratorium.
Okay.
After hearing the rest of the people here tonight.
Okay.
Pine Grove and.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sir, were you making public comment?
Yes. Hi, Kurt Hubschneider, 2866 Riverbend. I don't know how many people in this room tonight were here for years as we hammered out this ordinance And I was here at most every meeting. I've gone to lots of townships. I've been in the vacation rental business in Traverse City for 17 years. You know, everybody says, I've never had a complaint, I've never had a complaint, I've never had a complaint. I've never had a complaint. I work hard. People in the vacation rental business work hard, if they care, to make sure that our guests get more than what we promise them. We underpromise and overdeliver every single day. You know, questions came up at some of the meetings that we were in. What do you get per week for your house? What do you get per night for your house? And, you know, I would be honest and say, you know, I get this much per week, I get this much per night. And eyes would roll, oh my God, that's a ton of money. If you guys watched our balance sheets, if you looked at our balance sheets and looked at the amount of money that a good operator puts into a property to keep it maintained, the pressure that's put on us from ordinances is far outweighs what anyone in this room has to do to keep up their home. They can basically throw garbage in their yard and nobody cares. I mean, people care, but nothing gets done about it. Township has police ordinance that they could go and do something about it. You guys generally don't. But us, we maintain our places like unbelievable. We don't want a piece of paper laying in the yard because we want our place to be looking good and perfect for the guests that come. Because we want them to come back. And we want them to pay the good dollars so that we can maintain the place, so that we can make sure that our septics are pumped and things are working. Because if that stuff fails during someone's stay, one, it destroys their time and their enjoyment of their stay, and two, it's costly for us. We have to relocate them, we have to do something to help them, right? We can't just turn a blind eye. And then I hear complaints about, you know, I feel bad for the Pine Grove area. I had two sisters that owned houses on Indian Trail. I'm from here, born and raised on a lake outside of town. There's been vacation rentals on lakes forever. Some of my best friends came from the lakes that rented places on the lake year after year after year. When we were trying to fashion a good ordinance, there was a lot of talk about not allowing them in neighborhoods. And since those of us that spend a lot of money to be on water, and that's all I do is on water properties, it's frustrating when you're able to go buy a $200,000 house in a neighborhood, and that's competing against us who spent lots of money to have a place on a lake. It's very frustrating that that was allowed, because the planning committee back in 2017, 18, talked about not letting that happen.
Could you wrap up, please, sir?
Yeah, I will.
Shortly.
Yeah. Well, the fireworks thing, you got to look at this and say, if there's bad operators out there, there's enforcement things. Tax dollars aren't paying for those. We who pay for licenses are paying for the enforcement, right? If they're firing off fireworks and it's not a holiday, that's illegal. Call the police and the police should shut that down, right? Some of the complaints, I feel bad for people that are around bad operators, but let's isolate the bad operators and let's have the township go and do what we're supposed to do, which is go do something about that bad operator and get them either into compliance or out of the business. 'Cause it's bad for all of us, right?
Thank you for your comments.
And we've talked about maybe getting a citizens activation group going to where we could have a committee that would come together and work with the township and work with neighborhoods that are having issues. And some of us that are operators in the business could help to take care of some of those issues.
Thank
I
you.
thank you for the extra time.
Thank you.
My name is Mariah. I live on Indian Trail Boulevard. We bought our house in January of 2020.
I'm sorry, what was your last name?
Janiga, but I live on Indian Trail Boulevard. We bought our house in January of 2020. I support the moratorium. I also support the idea of a committee or a board while the moratorium is in action. Currently drafting a letter for work or ideas just to contribute on drafting a letter to share with our community and our local government. One of the reasons why I think that the moratorium is important is the more or the numbers that are increasing, the property owners that are vocal here and are caring for their properties and are showing concern for our community and our local government, those are the people that I enjoy having as short-term rental neighbors. But the people who are not here are just going to be growing if the moratorium is not in action. So I think those are the few things that I wanted to share.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, with that, we will close public comment. We will bring this back to the board. And again, before us is the short-term rental temporary moratorium. It is ordinance number 1 of 2022. And there are several whereas clauses, but I will just briefly go over the different sections. The moratorium temporarily prohibits the establishment of new short-term rental licenses and the issuance of licenses of rentals pending further study, enactment, enforcement of amendment to ordinance number 5, which is our short-term rental ordinance. This shall not prohibit the renewal of short-term rental licenses that were issued by the township prior to that date. And nothing, of course, allows anybody to operate a short-term rental without a valid license. The term for this ordinance is 6 months unless the board extends that or terminates it. And the rest are some legalese there. And so with that, I'll turn it over to the board. We've heard from Claire Carner and Preston Taylor, our planner and our zoning administrator, and some thoughts, but I will just offer one clarification. And that is, there's some discussion about what the legislature has or hasn't passed. As all of you know, because you received the MTA insights, it's kind of stuck in legislature. There's been something passed and it's not getting passed by the, this House, Senate, and so forth. But that legislation would make a short-term rental equal to or defined as a residential home. So it would change the definition quite a bit. However, we looked at a lot of things when we developed this ordinance, and this is one primary reason why we developed it as a general law ordinance. So even if that pending legislation were passed, we would still be appropriate to have and be legally defensible having our general law ordinance, because what we do is not zone the usage, but we impact the negative externalities that can come with short-term rental licenses, and that would still be allowed even with that legislation passed. So I did just want to mention that it would not negate our ordinance as it stands. So go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, just under terms of renewal, why was 6 months picked, or was that just arbitrarily picked a number? Because as we know, things don't move real fast in government. Is there any stipulation of how long that moratorium can be? I mean, could we adopt it at 12 months?
Yes, so there is no reason, there's no statute or anything regarding the 6 months. We could change that. We could also change by the way that it is extended or renewed. So I believe in here, we would have to extend the moratorium or terminate the moratorium to do anything other than 6 months. To do so would be amending this ordinance, and you'll recall amending the ordinance is the same process as implementing the ordinance. So it is cumbersome. We could take that renewal term and change some verbiage so that lengthening the term of 6 months or shortening it could be done simply by a resolution rather than amending this ordinance. But we would have to change the terminology of that section too.
Okay, the other thing that somebody brought up, and it's going to take, if we pass this tonight, how long before it takes in effect? It's based on how long it takes to get in the newspaper, is that correct?
Well, we notify it after we pass it, and it's so many
Now it
dates
takes 1
after. What's that?
It takes 1 week for it to get into the paper. They
Well,
just changed that.
Okay, to get into the paper, but what is the what is the implementation from when it is in the paper?
Well, it says effective date, Section 6. This ordinance shall take effect immediately after its publication is required by law.
Okay.
Okay, but I guess my concern is after listening to all the residents that got up and spoke, you know, right now you got 154 licenses. If this is passed tonight, it's gonna take a week. How many more are you gonna have? Or how many inactive ones do we have out there where people are just stockpiling it with the idea that the ordinance may pass and they'll be able to continue?
And you can't waive the publication requirement. And the Record Eagle just sent us last week that instead of 3 days, they have, it's now a week
Yeah.
due to their limitations.
Yeah, those are good, that's good information. I think what Glenn's saying is even regardless of that, I think you're going to have some ramp up, just like there was in response to this, to get those in. And we have especially seen that in the past 3 weeks, I would say.
So I don't know how we deal with that, if this is passed, if it has to be in, you know, somehow, and I don't even know how you'd be active or inactive. I don't know how you'd know.
So I think that was mentioned, like, are you talking about where there was a suggestion on it only being active licenses? So my response to that is what it says here is shall not prohibit the renewal of short-term rental licenses that were issued prior to the effective date. There is an effective date and there's an ending date. If they haven't renewed by that time, then they have an ending date. So, I mean, it doesn't have to be active. They would just cease to exist, and that would be relinquished.
I think he's talking about the stockpiling thing that someone mentioned.
Okay.
Buying it without really intending on using it.
I came in tomorrow, put in for a short-term rental license on my property, even though I'm not ever gonna use it properly. But that license would be good regardless of how long this moratorium went.
It's good
For
for
that
one
property.
address, though. It's
Right,
good per
it does.
address, so.
Well, I've been there 50 years, so.
Well, are you gonna leave and rent your property?
Yeah, it stays and runs with that address, so it's not like they can move it to
The
another.
address and the owner, though.
What's that?
If there's a sale and they have a short-term rental license, it does not go with the property.
That's right.
Property and owner.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments, questions? Claire and PT are just chomping at the bit to answer any questions if you have them.
I have a question.
Sure.
Ones that are in the queue that have turned in their application today that maybe are lacking something, normally we'll give them a list of what they need to finish up their application. What are we doing with those? Are they?
So the way that this ordinance is written does not give any latitude for any applications that are in the queue, the way that I read it. However, the short-term rental ordinance itself does have some latitude as to when staff considers an application complete, right? And then they have so many days to either deny it or issue it. So we have some latitude with that. So if someone has 10 things they have to turn in and they have 9 out of 10, Preston would then notify them, hey, you're just lacking this document. They have a certain amount of time before he would just deem that not an application, not complete, or complete, correct? That's correct. So, but, so I do think we have some latitude on the ordinance from 2019, ordinance number 5, on whether it is an application or not. This moratorium does not give us any ability to do anything with applications. It is either a license or it's not a license.
I'm sorry, I don't I didn't understand your answer. So in ordinance number 5 gives us the ability to, or the method that we use to approve if they're lacking items. This ordinance does not negate anything in ordinance number 5.
So
So we would follow ordinance number 5.
We would have to follow, no. Not, ordinance number 5 tells us what they have to do to fulfill the ordinance. If something is missing, we have some latitude in the back and forth with an applicant. And we are able to determine an application is not complete and in the queue, so to speak, until the staff determines that it is. But they
So
have.
if there's an ordinance that turned in today and they're missing something, they aren't going to be able to complete that application.
This moratorium language does not allow for that.
Okay.
Ordinance 5 still would allow them to be in the queue, but we couldn't issue it because of because of this ordinance.
That's what I was trying to
Unless they
get an
could,
answer to.
unless they
Now-
could fulfill it by the time the publication goes.
Or if we changed the language in the moratorium to say that complete applications, which are in queue basically, would still have the ability to have a license. So remember, there's a time between a completed application is not a license. A completed application is just an application. They still have to go through and review it. May or may not be granted. So we can change this moratorium to allow for complete applications to be granted a license.
If approved.
Completed applications put in, complete applications, or applications made at the time of this moratorium could still be granted a license through the short-term rental.
If approved.
Yeah, well,
Through the process.
Yeah.
Okay. There's mine.
Oops, I'm sorry, sir. So that, PT, you went through how many applications today? How many do we have that are left really in queue or hanging out there? I think it's just one, correct?
As of 6 o'clock, there was one, and that one that was there could not be approved. The application is complete. However, there's a section of the ordinance that doesn't allow it to be issued until a certain aspect of it is taken care of. So there's only one.
Okay. But there could be more coming in by the time it's published.
Well,
Inactive.
sure, but
Days.
they wouldn't have the ability to, no, because they wouldn't have the ability to get the license.
The ordinance shall take effect immediately after publication.
Well, let's think
So
about it.
it would not be until it's in the newspaper.
They would have to have everything in, complete, and completely accurate.
So someone that is inactive but has been previously licensed without any changes could come in and resubmit what was already approved, just inactive and become active again before the publication.
Well, if they're inactive, you're saying, yes, exactly, it's a whole new license. There is no inactive licenses. They either have a license or they don't have a
For
license.
the clarification.
Yeah.
But they could initiate one tomorrow.
They could
and
initiate
get
one
it all
tomorrow.
done and.
But I will
that's when they
say,
knew it.
if we did pass this and then we publicized it, and so you're talking about let's say 7 to 10 days, right? I think that we have seen probably the influx that we will see because of today's notification for tonight, that anyone who was thinking of it got it into Preston by today. And I'm not saying that there wouldn't be any. Could there be that option? Yeah.
Okay.
Will there be 20? That's 20 people getting a lot of information together in that short a period of time.
I would also like to see the time frame extended to a year moratorium, because it says in here that we can somewhere it said that we could retract it as well. So give ourselves a year, and if we get it done in 6 months, good for us, and we can retract it. I think it would be easier to do that than to extend it.
Okay, we would have to renotice that.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand that, but, I mean, at that point, gives us a year to do, we'd have to have a public hearing on redoing the ordinance anyway, so if that's 2 months at least, so now you're down to 4 months to get that rewritten, so I think a year would be better.
So Beth, are you saying we would have to renotice the intent for this and not have it take effect if we change that to a year?
Yeah, and that's where I'm saying if that's truly your intent, you're probably better off passing it at 6 months if you don't have other issues on it. Because then during that 6 months, you can go back and renotice that, and then you shorten that period down. Instead of 6 weeks that you have that hanging out there now you're still down to that 7 to 10 days.
Okay.
So you would renotice it while the 6 months, since 6 months moratorium is in effect?
Right.
At the different length of time?
Right. And to be real honest, as far as like, is there anything to change in this ordinance? Myself, if I wanted to see the moratorium, I would really want that issue of active applications, or I don't know if they say active, but actual applications addressed in here too. What will we do with applications? But to be honest, it's not worth renoticing it for one application.
No, it's not.
Where we've been communicating with the owner as well.
Okay.
Question, clarification.
Yeah.
You're saying that if you do a 12 months, and let's say in 6 months, you're ready to redo or already have the ordinance redone, you gotta go through a step to pull this back?
No, they're saying if we change it to 1 year right now,
Yeah.
we have to renotice it before we can approve the moratorium to go in
okay,
effect.
Okay, I'm with
So
you.
we need to
Yep.
not do that.
So if your intent is for this to be a year, I think that's absolutely fine. But your best step would just be to pass this and then roll right into that, changing it to a year.
With the 6 months is, in 5 months, we need to have decided if we have to go another 6 months, not
Or
end up with
before
a
that.
gap.
Yeah.
That was
Sure.
my concern.
Be proactive on it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Other thoughts, questions?
I guess as another layer, listening to how folks are having, at the very least, difficulties reaching out to have someone hear about enforcement and other issues, we need to make that a focus, to either find out why they're not getting responses and try to fix that, because it's not acceptable.
Sure, enforcement is an issue, but if you remember, enforcement takes funds, and originally, this license was set to be much higher, and then there was discussion of bringing it down all the way even to like $50, which doesn't give much funding for enforcement. We're at $350 right now. We have recently, I think in the past year, provided you where we were at with that as far as how much has been expended, because when we started this up, it takes that fund into a hole, and so we have to wait for that to build back up. So that enforcement takes funding to do that, so that may be something that you want to take a look at if enforcement is an issue for you, is what is it going to take financially for additional enforcement? Because as most of you know, I think all of you know, particularly the ones who work in the office, Claire and Preston and Leslie are very busy in planning and zoning. And the other thing I would say too about enforcement is one of the things I would like to see changed in the ordinance is right now, a short-term rental owner has to notify their adjacent neighbor, right? But it's apparent that this affects more than just their adjacent property line owner. And so I think we really have an opportunity to notify based very similarly as we do in the Planning Commission, which is 300 feet.
We do that at this level as well.
Yeah, right, for the board, but not for the zoning ordinance, it's it's the adjacent one. So I think that that's an opportunity too that will help get that owner information and the person who's responsible to be reachable for issues, get that name and number into more than just the adjacent property owner. I also think too, I don't know that, I guess I would talk with staff about this tomorrow, but as far as host compliance provides us a lot of services. And we've changed our level, we've added and dropped things. They have kind of a cafeteria plan. And we didn't find that the hotline was very helpful at all. And so we dropped that. But as far as like contacting host compliance for enforcement, that's not, other than the hotline, that's not what they do. So host compliance isn't there for short-term rentals to contact or homeowners to contact. Host compliance is a resource for us as a township to keep track on the application process. They have a computer system that we use for the applications. They let us know how many operating short-term rentals are operating, whether they have a license or not, or whether they're in compliance or not. It's not for an enforcement piece for property owners to call. So, and the other thing is with the complaints, there is, everyone is well-intentioned when they make a complaint, and they're in a tough situation, right? But there is a way to make that complaint so that it is trackable and enforceable. And so many times a complaint or something that we'll get in the office is, well, we had this happen last weekend, and that's not a complaint, and we can't take any action on that. It has to go through a step process to do that. PT, would you speak a little bit about that process?
To say that, well, Beth is correct, host compliance, that role that they had in enforcement that's been removed as it was found to be extremely ineffective. Thank you very much for turning that up.
I tried already, it didn't work.
I'm shivering. For clarification, before I get into this, the complaints that were brought up by the public may very well be valid 100%. They're not landing at my door. Some of them have. We have received, some complaints this year, but some of them just have not. And there is a system in place for getting them there to me, either through the computer or through calling me. A difficulty lies is if it's 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, or they've been frustrated, understandably frustrated. They didn't call in, they didn't necessarily know the process, and now they say this has been going on for 6 months. There's no history with law enforcement being called there. There's no history with the office addressing or receiving any complaints on the particular property. And so that makes it difficult to enforce it, since it's past tense. A week is still manageable, but there have been instances where it was long past that week, and it becomes an issue at that point. And when our office does receive a complaint on a property, whether it's founded or unfounded, I personally go into our system and it gets attached to the address number. And then I do a narrative on it, so that if I get another call on it, that history is there.
And you as well contact with the homeowner as well if you get a complaint.
Absolutely. Yep.
So when things aren't handled in that manner, again, as Preston said, it is very much a valid, frustrating situation that the person's in, but because of the way the complaint was perceived to be made, it doesn't get registered or lodged in a way that we can effectively deal with it. So while it seems like an enforcement problem to them, it's more of an alignment. For example, the sheriff's office, I mean, and I'm not suggesting that they do, but when they get a complaint, it's not logged in as a short-term rental license problem. It's logged in as whatever is the activity that's a violation. Yep. Thank you, PT.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Sorry, I thought, isn't there I should ask, do we have a form on the computer on the website that they can fill out? And that's a good way for them to lodge a complaint so that we have documentation of it.
That's a preferred way, so that I have that trail.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that speaks to what the one resident, I think it was Mr. Drury, said, where, hey, there's like 10 complaints, but yet everyone's saying there's complaints. How do these reconcile? And I think that's one of the things that impacts.
Yeah, I think it's a citizens, what's the name of the form? I can't remember the verbiage we have.
Citizen request form?
Citizen request form.
Yeah, violation form.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead, Mindy.
So if there is a complaint, say a noise complaint at a house, and the sheriff's department goes, and we also get a complaint into the office, can we go back to, is there a log on that? I don't know. Is there a log on that address that says we've been to this house for X times for X, Y, and Z?
There is with me, because anytime I get a complaint on a particular address, I go into what a system called BSNA, and I attach it to that address with a narrative.
But we
is
may
there-
not.
Is the sheriff's department do the same thing?
No. So that's what, we may not ever hear of those. If somebody calls and the sheriff's office, maybe they are able to deal with it functionally at that time, we'll never even be aware of it.
So what we need to make sure that residents are doing is if the police do come, they still need to fill out that form so Preston can follow up.
Yeah, and probably in that form, they would just let us know what the result was.
Mindy, there's also been 2 occasions where there was particular address that I was hearing about way too much. That was not this year, it was last year. I spoke with the community police officers about that address. And even though they don't often work the hours where those noise complaints would be, they could pass that information on to the oncoming shift so that they were aware of it, that it was an ongoing issue.
Have we removed any licenses?
Since I've been here, we have not revoked a license. I don't know if we have prior to me.
There's a three strikes before you revoke a license. As far as the notification process, someone suggested that, notifying whether it was short-term rental owners or any other group about when something's on the agenda. We don't do that. We do what is required by statute. To do anything else is a very slippery slope legally for us. And so we do have the service that's very, very helpful on the website that's called Documents on Demand. And if you go into that, where you'll look for our minutes and agendas and packets, and it'll say notification, email notification, you sign up for that, and you can subscribe to that service. So then you can pick you won't get littered with like every board that we have, or every document from every board. You can pick literally, I only want to see the agendas, so I want to know what's coming up. Or I only want to see the minutes, so I know what the action is. And you can subscribe specifically to that for that specific board. So that's how we get to that notification process. But yeah, we don't notify specific parties or groups of parties. As a matter of fact, we've been asked more than once on giving out a list of short-term rental owners. We do not do that. We worked with legal counsel to determine what's appropriate. We will give out the owner of the license holder, the license number, and the property ID number. And they can take it from there. And I do, just another observation from what someone mentioned, for me personally, was someone mentioned, where were people when we were drafting this ordinance? Well, I mean, we know that was a long process. Mindy knows better than most of us here because she was on the planning commission where it really started. And so she's had the benefit of listening in both boards. But I don't know that it's fair not to say, why weren't you at the table? I get that idea, but at the same time, I don't think some people even realize what may or may not impact them before it impacts them. So I think the important thing is that people are here to listen and impact and have their thoughts known. Are there any preferences on actions or thoughts?
Ready for a motion? Although I lost the one, my computer shut down, so, thank you. I would make a motion to approve the temporary moratorium ordinance for short-term rental, ordinance number 1 of 2022.
Support.
Okay, motion is made by Bartlett and supported by Lyle. Is there further discussion? Okay, with that, it is an ordinance, so Ann will do a roll call vote.
Bartlett.
Yes.
Lyle.
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
Escorted.
Yes.
M. Cortade.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes. Okay, Claire, you have another project with your work cut out for you. I know you already have potential meeting dates or times with council. Do you want to just touch on some of the follow-up coming up? Preston, thank you for being here. And thank you very much for coming to the meeting. If you are leaving, just leave quietly. We appreciate that. Have a good evening. Claire, go ahead.
Yep. So thanks for the discussion, and I took some notes. We've got kind of a list of what.
Sorry, Claire, she needs her mic.
Yeah, sorry about that. We have a list for council that they were kind of working on the ordinance amendments. Based on some of the input that we've heard tonight, there's some additional input that I'm looking to follow up with. I would think that it would be reasonable to bring an ordinance amendment back to the township board for your July meeting. And I guess I wanted to clarify with you tonight, because I've kind of heard conflicting information, but I think at the last joint meeting in October, the plan was for the board to kind of move forward with this as opposed to the planning commission. Is that correct? We're going to keep the planning commission updated. They're interested. They want to kind of be apprised of where we're moving. But since this is a board ordinance, my understanding was that this will come back to the board. And so I would like to bring a draft of the ordinance, at least as a starting point, to the board in July.
And we'll still, just to be clear, so for example, when I was talking about the notification being 300 feet instead of adjacent properties, let's just say that wasn't on your punch list, okay? So it didn't make it into the July draft. I, as a board member, or any other concerns others might have, would still have the ability to talk about another idea for the ordinance and put that forth, correct?
Yeah, I would think this would be an introduction, and it would be a draft introduction. So we would absolutely have opportunity it would be a starting point.
And I know Claire rewatched that joint meeting. I know because I wanted to watch with her and have popcorn, but we didn't get a chance to. We were way too busy. But I know she rewatched that and took copious notes about what planning commissioners felt, what township board members felt too. So I think it should be a really meaty draft that we get back.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Well, we'll move you straight into master plan.
I needed to stand up. I was sitting too long. Okay, so you've got the draft master plan in front of you. This was the Planning Commission, I thought, did an excellent job kind of taking a leadership role in this master plan update. So they had monthly work sessions where they would go through each one of the chapters, review the, demographic trends, the natural resources information, review maps. We had the citizen survey. After they went through all of the results of the citizen survey, they decided that they wanted more input, and so they asked staff to go back and facilitate focus groups with specific key stakeholder groups. So we went back and did those focus groups. So I feel confident that this draft really represents the community input that we heard. The survey results as well as the focus group information really served as the kind of basis for the action plan that was drafted. And that was the action plan that the board and planning commission reviewed during your joint session in October. So this is the draft that we've got right now. It was reviewed by the planning commission on May 17th. They recommended it to the township board. And so based on the state statute, the Michigan Planning Enabling Act, the elected body is the one that will send it out for public review. So the next step would be for you all to review this. You can send it out for review with or without edits, or you can delay it if you have some substantial changes. Once it goes out for public review, it's out for 63 days. So I have a large mailing list, about 500 residents that filled out the master plan survey that I send out. Let them know it's out for public review. We'll be collecting comments for those 63 days. After that, the Planning Commission will schedule the public hearing, review all of that input, likely make edits, and would adopt it at a future date. But this is kind of the last official opportunity that the Township Board can take action on the master plan. After that, it goes to the Planning Commission that holds the public hearing.
Okay, well, a tremendous amount of work. I mean, this is just a huge undertaking. This is a master plan update, but it was a pretty hefty update, I would say.
It was a rewrite.
You think?
Yeah.
We kept, so the future land use, I think that we didn't make changes to the future land use map, and so I think that kind of those land use policies were pretty foundational. But the action plan, which is what, like, kind of our priorities for the next 5 years, what we're really working towards, I would say was, complete rewrite. And so that's kind of, and my hope is to the beginning of each year, work with the Planning Commission to review that action plan and figure out what our priorities are moving forward, because I'm hoping that this is as actionable as possible and we don't adopt it and then just kind of shove it away for the next few years.
Claire.
So I feel like this is a pretty implementable plan, so I'm excited about that.
When you were talking about the land use map, I remember prior to when you were at the township, someone mentioning that they didn't feel that the density from the land use correlated to the zoning ordinance. And that's stated on the land use, isn't it, too, on the land use map?
The future land use map has a recommended range of dwelling units per acre. And in a number of instances, the dwelling units per acre is a little bit higher than what the underlying zoning is. And you'll see that in and those are some of the areas like along the Hammond corridor that would be, a good candidate for a rezoning. Maybe they're zoned moderate density, but their future land use identifies them as 5 to 8 dwelling units per acre. So, on a corner, it would be a candidate for a rezoning based on, a number of factors. So I think it's reasonable to have the zoning and then have kind of a range of what the township feels is reasonable for future zoning or for future density of development.
So with that land use having a higher density, does that give you the latitude then when you're working with the zoning ordinance for, carrots, as you will, with developers? So your zoning ordinance might have a certain range, but you have different things that you're enticing a developer to do, and then they may increase that density. And then that ties into the land use then? I mean,
I'll point to Elmbrook, right, because it was zoned industrial, right? And we've moved it to what the master plan said, right? And the only reason we could do that was because of what the master plan said. So we moved the zoning district into what the master plan said, but only because we had that already in the master plan. So just because something's zoned something right now doesn't mean that that is what in the future we want it to be.
right, that's your land use map,
So it gives you
right?
the flexibility and the carrots, if you will. There's more steps to the process, but it still is attainable. Did I say that? Okay. I have 2 comments. I would love to see one less picture of the pickleball courts at Grace and one more picture of the Pine Grove playground. And I want this picture gone, because this isn't us.
It's not us, it's Acme.
That's Acme.
Let me see
The
that
back
one.
page.
Oh, yeah, going up that way, yeah.
Good comments.
I don't know how that one got in there.
It's a pretty picture.
It is.
It is pretty, but it's not us.
Tell you what, that young gentleman who did those drone pictures for us, he did a really nice job. There's some great
Beautiful
shots
picture.
in
We should
there.
share it to
Oh,
Acme.
yeah.
They could use it.
Yeah.
It's all right. It shows the coastline.
I had a couple of comments, if that's where we're at.
We share.
Beth, did you hear Sue?
No, I love that one. I think that one's really great. Go ahead.
I have a couple of comments, if that's
Sure,
appropriate.
go ahead. Were you done, Mindy? Okay, go ahead.
Very nicely done. When I went back and I ticked and tacked the different sections in your chapter 2, with like the families with children focus group, the business focus group, my overlying thought was, I wish we could have had more attendees. The pandemic really could skew some of the things that are very important to our community. I know this doesn't have to be done. The set time frame means, what are we, 10 years down the road when it has to be done again? Is that what it is? 5? Thank you. I think in 5 years, we're going to see a tremendous difference. One of the ones that I found on chapter 3 with the population, the Census Bureau stated that they were only able to reach 70% of our residents to confirm population. 70%. We're missing out on a lot of residents' revenue. We have 10,300 registered voters, but we only have 11,460 in our population. We're not just an adult community. We have many children. Look at all the schools we have. So we're not capturing that. This is the best that we have, but I think we need to keep eyes wide open that those numbers really are blowing up, especially with the development we have. The third thing that I wanted to comment about was the map on broadband. This was prepared October of 2020 for the township, but it's not accurate.
It was not, I believe that it was the best data that we had was updated after 2020, but the data that we had was from 2020, and the map was created after that, but.
My house is in the center of the township. I have one of the worst receptions in the township. I can't get charter, I can't get internet. I have to take a cellular plan in order to be able to have internet access of any kind. If I had children in my home that had to study under the pandemic, they would have lost 2 years.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that could be just a matter of taking that map out, because that is the best available.
Yeah, and I'm sure that if my home is that way, how many more are that way? So, wonderful stuff. I don't want to be the one to have to do the rewrite by myself, like you've had, and you've had input, but I know this was a huge focus. But when I was looking at it over the weekend again, those are the things that I just wanted to make sure that we stayed cognizant of, because it's not.
What page was the map on, Sue?
It says it's on page 138 of 203. On the one that went out with the packet, there was the one that Claire had sent out to us a couple weeks ago too, but it's the same map.
What chapter was it in?
It is chapter 5. It's map 11, broadband internet coverage.
Yeah.
So I guess that's all I have right this moment. Thank you.
I will say, I know that with the census, they had come out with something, I wish I had saved it, where they looked at different communities, and I'm not sure how narrow they drilled down to, counties, MPOs, or what, but I know they took a look at where they thought the census would have impacted by more than a marginal amount.
Yeah.
And versus, yes, there might be a difference, definitely, but it's not, it's negligible. Not that that's negligible to us, but from a statistics point of view. And it didn't, our area, I remember looking in our area, didn't pop up as the best. I wish I had more information on that for you. And if I come across it again, I'll save it and share it with you guys.
Well, there are thresholds of additional revenue provided to a community based on those population milestones. And 10,000 population was a huge one for us. I think realistically, we probably have closer to 16,000 in our population, given the data that we see through the voter file system. That's getting us closer to another one of those earmarks. And to say we're under 11,600, it's just not, it's not a true capture of what we've got.
I know the MPO, you know, how long they've been anticipating the MPO to come to fruition.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, that should be, I mean, it's taken so long that like nobody, it should be a guarantee with 2020, and nobody even wants to say, yes, it's coming. It's like they're gearing up the meetings, and Networks Northwest will be coming to the township in October. And I was like, yeah, what's a definite thing, right? And nobody will even say it's definite, even though we know how definite it is. So it's interesting.
Well, I thought in the statistics, when we were talking about this long ago, the male to female population in the 5 to 9 is skewed so badly that you can almost see that there's a population issue right there, because, you know, the 5 to 9, it says there's less than 200 females and there's over 400 males.
And I did double check that.
I mean, we looked at that when we were doing the families with children, then it was like, that doesn't make sense. But then my son's 5th grade class at Cortade Elementary School, there is like 10 girls and 30 boys. So sometimes it does happen.
Okay, so you were looking for a motion to send this out for distribution? What's the wording on that, Claire?
Can I just
Yeah.
ask? Some of and I think you maybe did this for interest of reading, so it wasn't all the same, but it made me pause when I was reading it. I wrote down, there's another thing. The paragraph, I can't even remember which one it was, but the paragraph about a table, there were 2 paragraphs, and then the tables were following both paragraphs instead of the paragraph, the table, the paragraph, the table. It just, like I said, I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it just kind of made me go, well, wait a minute. Now I'm at this table, and it went with that paragraph, and
Yeah, because I kind of had graphically, I had the tables up and then the
Yeah, I
If
just,
you,
I
if
don't,
you want to send me those,
okay.
I'm happy.
I just didn't want, I didn't think it was necessary to spell them out. And there is, like, on one of them, there was the paragraph and then a couple tables, and then the last sentence of what should have been the paragraph above, it was on the next page, just the placement stuff, so.
Perfect. Yeah, I can make
I
those
can,
changes.
yeah, I just didn't think it needed to go detail here.
So the motion's
Wonderful
on.
job.
Yeah, Claire, you did a very nice job.
I was involved back in the 90s when Bruce Ortenberger did one, and it is pretty intense, so good job.
And this was done, what, 6 weeks postpartum. She worked on it for 2 weeks, her first 2 weeks back from maternity leave, pretty much nonstop, so. Yep, there's a passable motion to approve with changes, or deny the draft master plan for the 63-day public comment period.
Move to approve the draft master plan for the 63-day public comment period, as long as that last page is taken out.
With proposed changes?
Yeah.
I think we can take care of that without worrying about it
With
too
the
much.
notes.
Is there
support
support?
that.
Okay, motion by Walters and support by Bartlett. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by aye.
Aye.
Opposed by no. Okay, motion passes. Thank you for the hard work on that.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire.
Oh, I did promise, and I apologize, I did promise at the beginning when people were here that we would accept public comment with master plan, and I'm sorry, we just got to talking about it and people were leaving and it escaped me. Is there anyone who would like to offer any public comment on the master plan? Sure. Oh, just a double thumbs up? Well, very good. Thank you, Carol. I appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. With that, we have 1 and 2. Oh, no, we did 1.
Yeah.
So we have 2, which is the buildings and grounds part-time wage rate. And this is, we have a part-time and a full-time in buildings and grounds. And we have our part-time buildings and grounds person. This is coming to the board partially in recognition of, well, one, I will just say, he did a phenomenal job while we were down a full-time person. And he just really did a good job for us. And was there when we had, you know, something happen at the park that wasn't anticipated, those types of things.
And it was longer than he thought.
It was longer than he thought, and Bob, you know, sweet talks him into, and he stayed with us this year, for this summer. And again, we are changing. We had offered mileage while the while the disability had the full-time employee out. And then you can see on the cover page, I walk through that. And it's in recognition of the difficulty finding employees, the fuel expenses, and just the recognition of the job as well. And this would be a rate that I would likely need to have if I had to replace this person. So with that, we're opening that up to any comments or questions.
Yeah, I brought it off. I struggled with it. I struggled with the idea of giving him mileage. I mean, he signed up for it, and I understand he's a good worker, and I understand he's doing a wonderful job. But we rarely reward anybody else for doing a good job, and I just personally think that this should be part of the budget process, and that if it's brought to us then, and then it could be considered. But to do it mid-year, I just don't feel it's appropriate at this time, I guess. Again, it should be about the position, not the individual. That's we've always said about wages. And the position hasn't changed a whole lot, but you're trying to raise the wages 10%, so I'm just not for it.
Sure, I appreciate those comments. But would just note, I don't think that always wages are about just the position. Obviously, if you have someone who is doing a good job, you want to reward that as well. I think that that's probably been lacking in local government or in government for a long time, and affects the retention. And then, as far as, whether it's done at budget time, I think that's a great time to do it at budget time. But as we passed the resolution earlier, it doesn't negate us doing something mid-year. And when I see something that I think can impact our operations, I bring that to you. And this is one of those things. As you can see through the resolution that was passed during budget time, we did have other adjustments. Some up to 15.8%. That's the highest one, I think. The lowest is at 1.55. Most township internal here were about 2%. So if the board is not comfortable with that percentage, I don't think it's a this or nothing. I think we could also do something in between that percentage amount too, if the board is comfortable with that.
If I can.
Sure.
I guess I'd rather look at it as the position, somewhat like we did with the election inspectors. It's the position. If they left us to go for a better wage at McDonald's or another fast food location, or like in an inspector, they lost wages because that was their position. We wanted to be in a competitive market. I would rather we not have singled out a person as a thank you, but as the position requires this amount. I don't see a problem with the amount, although it does equate into a 15.9% raise, but I think we were extremely low before. I believe we were low because it wasn't about the money, it was about having something to do when the gentleman accepted the position in the beginning. But I really think that we shouldn't look at it as the person, it's the position. I would prefer to look at it that way. And I'm not against the wage, but I'm not in favor of it as being a reward for doing a job well done.
Sure, I can appreciate that. This isn't a thank you. This person, just like any other, is thanked when they're every other week on their payroll. This is a recognition of the quality work, not a thank you, but of the quality work they are repeatedly every week bringing to the township. And the fact that if I did need to replace this is absolutely what I would have to go out for on an hourly wage. And so I think it is unfair and almost, I won't use a stronger word, but for the township to knowingly just continue to pay lower for a position that we know should have that rate. But like I said, completely, whatever the board's decision is, that's fine, and we'll implement it.
I would agree that it would take that at least to attract someone else. I know in another nonprofit that I work for, we've had to raise wages twice in the last year in order to even get people to answer an ad in the paper. And it's similar wage earning area, similar wage, and I won't say similar work, but not a
comparable,
not a career position, if
Yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah.
I don't know, but so I would agree. I don't have a problem with raising it for the position because I don't think you'd get somebody for less, personally.
Yeah. Glenn or Mindy? You don't have to, that's fine. Or, go ahead.
Well, the thing is that I'm not sure, if the guy does a lot of different things. $17 an hour isn't much, believe me. You can go to McDonald's and get up to 21. But again, I would agree that it's the position, not the person, but the expectations on the position should be, and I don't know what we look at when we hire a part-time guy, if it's just a warm body or if it's somebody that can do a lot
Yeah,
of things.
yeah.
Well, somebody with some ability to use
Right.
the equipment,
Right.
which
And-
is another thing.
Yeah, and he does have, there is different equipment, there's the level of familiarity as well with the township is quite high in this position. And you can tell that because we had a relatively easy while we were down one full-time person. Were there, blips sometimes here, with, maybe snow removal, but that's not something that we tasked him with during that time. We had a contractor handle that because he was only here limited hours. But he is, what we require out of this is not only that skill set and that knowledge, but also the degree of flexibility for this job is huge. So for example, just Friday, there were some different things that came down the pike for this week where I said, hey, listen, I know you're planning on having him come in on Monday. I also need him in on, I think it was like Wednesday and Thursday in a row. Can we do that? Absolutely, was done. So the degree of flexibility is high as well, and that's routinely met too, so. With that, I understand what you're saying, but I think that this is in line with some of the other wages that you look through on this amendment. I think it's in line with the market, and I do think it is in line with the quality of the services that we're receiving. So I guess with that, I would offer.
Yeah.
9, right? Did we do any other resolutions?
We determined this was number 9.
9, yeah.
Move to approve Resolution 2022-9, a resolution amending Attachment A of Resolution 2021-35, and approving the associated 10% wage increase for part-time seasonal building and grounds personnel for a current new wage of $17.31 per hour.
Okay, is there support for that?
Support.
Okay, motion is made by Walters and supported by Bartlett. Any further discussion?
Just clarification. So you want this to happen the next Monday with the next payroll?
I put that in there.
It says
but I
effective the
don't-
first payroll after June 14, so that would be
Right.
Monday.
Right.
Well, Sunday if you work Sundays.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, it's a resolution, and we'll do a roll call vote.
Walters.
Yes.
Bartlett.
Yes.
M. Corte.
No.
Lyle. S. Corte.
Yes.
Brent.
Yes. My goodness, are we at the end of the agenda?
Public comment.
Public comment. Thank you very much for keeping me on track there. Public comment, this is the second public comment period for this evening, and anyone who would like to voice their perspective to the board is welcome to come up. Hi, Jill, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good.
I debated about this, but the reason that I'm up here tonight is to talk a little bit about a prominent landowner in the community and the fact that they're in a little bit of a predicament that is affecting our entire East Bay Township, but I believe I have a potential solution for it. This landowner is in a real estate predicament that they find themselves in with no money to cover expenses on their very desirable property that's protected by an already established Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy easement. We're talking about the Go Rec property, obviously. As a result, the landowner has asked you, the township, and we, the citizens, to make some irreparable concessions and risk the future of the land and water for them by way of their PUD application. Also, their ask has caused friction in the way of lawsuits, friction between neighbors, uncomfortable scrutiny of public officials. We all know the kind of heartburn that application has caused us. There's been reluctancy or refusal by the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy to discuss the property in spite of the fact that there's a potential avenue and a potential donor that is interested in covering the cost at some level, whether by loaning or investing money to decommission the facilities on the site and make the property viable to give back to the Conservancy for their acquisition. The Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy has done this with parks before. Boy Scout camps before. They've done this before. They know how to do it. The landowner can literally give back the property since they've had virtually no investment in it, like the other property this evening where people had paid for the property and looking for a profit on it. They can give back the property since it's a financial burden on them, and they'd be foolish not to. And then the Conservancy could take the land over and put it under proper guidance and proper ownership, like the conservation easement actually reads. The reason I'm bringing it up to you tonight is I would like the township perhaps to get involved, maybe at the level that you got involved with this, the way you got involved with the Holiday Parks project. Perhaps those funds don't equate equivalently, but perhaps there's a way that you could get involved and help facilitate this, investing as much time or brain energy with your partnership with the Grand Traverse Regional Land Conservancy to hopefully facilitate this as a partner, since we do have a potential donor. The benefits would be that the Rotary would rid themselves of the financial burden since they don't have money to operate the facility. There would be no more reason for a PUD application, because that's the premise of the PUD, is that it needs to pay for itself. The Land Conservancy could actually enforce the land and protect the land and water. We could have quiet recreation for all the people on both sides that want quiet recreation. There's high demand for that on that property. That could actually take place. It seems to be that everybody wants that. It would alleviate the predicament of enforcement. Regardless of what we say and what we believe, enforcement is going to be a problem on that property, whether we call the sheriffs, whether we call Preston, it is going to be a problem. So it would eliminate that issue and that expense, and there would be no costly tax tribunal the minute the assessor reassesses the property for commercial use if that PUD were to get approved. That will ultimately likely end up in a tax tribunal, and that burden ultimately ends up on the township.
Thank you, Jill. Can you wrap up?
Sure. I would like to say, finally, it would be in everybody's benefit that, especially if the township were involved, that we can enjoy the property. This would all be off of everybody's hair, and we can all just recreate at that property. So if there's anything you can do, please let us know.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
And with that, upcoming meetings. Oh, sorry. How are you doing?
Good. Nancy Gonzalez, 709 Munson Avenue, and I just wanted to come up here and tell you guys thank you for having the courage to open up the short-term rental issue again and vote for the moratorium. All of the residences appreciate it, and I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Gonzalez. With that, the upcoming meetings that we haven't, I didn't miss anyone else, I want to make sure. Our next meeting, is that July 9th? I believe, correct? July 3rd.
July 11th.
July 11th, okay. So our next regular meeting is July 11th, and then you guys all did get an email that we're looking at the August 8th meeting or August 15th for GoRec. And it will depend, and that just depends on availability of schedules that we will know and have nailed down mid-July. We're thinking July 11th, 12th, 13th, right in that time frame.
Well, 13th through the 15th, Board of Directors.
July?
Yeah.
Oh, no. We'll know when the other people are
Okay.
available in
You're gonna have it in
August.
August.
Yeah, so we'll know in July about that time for August 8th or the 15th. So if we have it for a regular meeting, we'll either try to keep that agenda pretty light, or we may end up having a special meeting and putting some of those items on a special agenda. So if there are no objections, then we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for this evening. Thank you for coming. Thanks, Sue.